Get up. Now. The voice cut through the pre-dawn cold like a blade. You've been warned 3 times already. This is your last chance before I call the police. The old man sleeping against the hospital wall stirred slowly. His movements were precise despite the stiffness, economical in a way that seemed oddly deliberate for someone who had spent the night on concrete. He didn't scramble or panic. He simply opened his eyes, blinked once, and began folding the thin sleeping bag with military corners. What the security chief standing over him didn't know, what nobody arriving for the early shift could possibly guess, was that in exactly 15 minutes this confrontation would be uploaded to the internet. In 2 hours, it would reach 500,000 veterans. And by nightfall, the man doing the yelling would be suspended from his job, while the homeless man he was threatening would be offered a private room inside the very hospital he'd been forbidden to enter. Gerald Whitmore had been chief of hospital security for 15 years. Before that, mall security. Before that, a brief stint as a crossing guard that hadn't worked out. He stood now in his pressed uniform with his hands on his hips, his voice pitched loud enough for the nurses arriving through the main entrance to hear. This was his domain, his rules, and this vagrant had been testing those rules for 3 months. The old man finished folding his sleeping bag and rose to his feet. Even after a night on concrete, even at what had to be close to 70 years old, there was something about the way he stood. Straight, balanced, his feet shoulder-width apart, his hands loose at his sides. "Sir," the old man said quietly. His voice was hoarse from disuse, but respectful. "I understand. I'll move away from the entrance." "You'll move off the property," Whitmore corrected. "This is a hospital, not a homeless shelter. You want a bed? There's a place on 5th Street. The old man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Just for a moment. Then it relaxed. "With respect, sir, I'm not looking for a bed. I'm waiting for my brother." "Your brother." Whitmore's voice dripped with contempt now, playing to the small audience of staff members slowing their walk to watch. "Right? Every vagrant's got a story. Your brother's a patient here?" "Yes, sir. Room 404. ICU." Whitmore pulled out his radio with a theatrical flourish. "This is Security Chief Whitmore. Can someone check ICU room 404 for me? Does the patient there have any homeless family members lurking around?" A nurse passing by stopped. Her name tag read Marcus Webb. She'd been working nights for 6 years, and she'd seen this old man nearly every morning for the past 3 months. Had even snuck him coffee a few times when Whitmore wasn't around. There was something about him, the way he never asked for anything, the way he always called everyone sir or ma'am, the way he kept himself clean despite having nowhere to go, washing up in the public restroom, his worn clothes somehow always neat. "Chief," Marcus said carefully, "he's not causing any trouble. He's just sitting there." Whitmore wheeled on him. "He's trespassing. Hospital policy is clear. No loitering on hospital grounds, especially not by the main entrance where patients and families have to see him." The old man hadn't moved. He stood with that same straight posture, his hands at his sides, his eyes forward. On his feet were boots that had to be 30 years old, held together in places with duct tape. His jacket was military surplus, the kind you could buy at any Army-Navy store, faded olive green with patches so worn the unit designations were barely visible. "How long have you been coming here?" Whitmore demanded, stepping closer. "Be honest." 91 days, the old man replied. "Since the night they brought him in." "Brought who in?" "My brother, Raymond Morrison, staff sergeant. He had a stroke. They said he might not wake up. I told them I'd wait." Whitmore laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. "You've been sleeping on concrete for 3 months, waiting for someone who might never wake up?" "Yes, sir." "That's insane." The old man's expression didn't change. "Perhaps, sir, but I made him a promise a long time ago. I don't break promises." There was something in the way he said it, something that made Marcus stop walking away, something that made another nurse, Dr. Patricia Nguyen, arriving for her shift, pause at the entrance and watch. "A promise," Whitmore repeated mockingly. "What kind of promise requires sleeping outside in January?" "The kind you make to someone who saved your life," the old man said quietly. His right hand moved unconsciously to his left forearm, fingers touching the worn fabric of his jacket sleeve. Beneath that sleeve, though nobody could see it yet, was a tattoo. Coordinates, a date, and a green beret insignia so detailed it had taken the artist 4 hours to complete 50 years ago. "Look," Whitmore said, his patience clearly exhausted. "I don't care about your promises or your stories. You can't stay here. Hospital property. Hospital rules. You leave now, or I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." "I understand the rules, sir," the old man said, "and I respect your position, but I'm not leaving." The words were soft but absolute. There was no anger in them, no challenge, just a simple statement of fact delivered with the calm of someone who had made far harder decisions in far worse circumstances. Whitmore's face flushed. "You're refusing a direct order to vacate the premises?" "I'm maintaining a position," the old man corrected gently. "There's a difference." Marcus Webb's hand moved to his pocket where his phone waited. Something told him he needed to record this. Later he would tell the news crews that it was the old man's bearing that made him do it. The way he stood his ground without aggression. The way he showed respect even while being disrespected. The way his hands stayed loose and ready in a manner that seemed practiced. Instinctive. Dr. Nguyen moved closer, her curiosity overriding her schedule. She was the daughter of a Vietnamese refugee, a man who had fled Saigon in 1975 with the help of American soldiers. Her father had told her stories. Stories about the quiet professionals. The men who appeared from nowhere, did impossible things, and disappeared again. Men who spoke softly and moved with precision. Men who never broke their promises. If you're watching this story from anywhere in the world, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. Stories of loyalty and sacrifice like this one happen in every community, maybe even yours. You might have a quiet hero in your own neighborhood whose humble appearance hides an extraordinary story of service and brotherhood. Drop a comment below telling us your city or country. And if stories like this speak to you, please consider subscribing. The radio on Whitmore's belt crackled. "Security Chief, this is ICU. Room 404 patient is Raymond Morrison, 68 years old. Admitted 3 months ago with massive stroke. Currently comatose. No family listed except emergency contact, which we were unable to locate." "See?" Whitmore said triumphantly. "No family listed. You're not family. You're just some homeless guy with a story." The old man's eyes moved to the hospital entrance. Through the glass doors, if you knew where to look, you could just see the edge of the ICU wing. 4th floor, room 404. He'd memorized the layout in the first week. Had watched the patterns of the nurses, the shift changes, the quiet hours when they'd sometimes let him stand outside the room and look through the window at the still form in the bed. "That would be my fault," the old man said. "When I asked for next of kin, I couldn't be found. I was living under the Morrison Street Bridge at the time. No phone, no address. By the time word reached me through the shelter network, they'd already admitted him." Whitmore pulled out his own phone. "I'm calling the police. You've got 2 minutes to gather your things and leave, or you're spending the night in jail." The old man bent slowly and picked up his sleeping bag. He rolled it with precise movements, each fold exact, the final bundle tight and compact. Military training doesn't fade, even after decades, especially when it was earned in places where sloppy packing could mean the difference between life and death. As he straightened, his jacket sleeve rode up slightly. Just an inch. Just enough. Dr. Nguyen saw it first. Numbers. Coordinates maybe. And the edge of something else. Something green and detailed. She stepped closer. "Excuse me," she said to the old man. Her voice was professional but curious. "That tattoo, may I ask what it represents?" The old man looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time. Saw the intelligence in her eyes. The compassion. The genuine interest rather than judgment. "A promise kept, ma'am," he said softly. Whitmore was dialing now. But Dr. Nguyen held up a hand. "Wait," she said. "Just wait." Then to the old man. "What kind of promise?" The old man was quiet for a long moment. Marcus's phone was recording now, though nobody had noticed yet. The pre-dawn sky was just beginning to lighten over the hospital. Cars were pulling into the parking lot. The day shift was arriving. Life was continuing. And on the 4th floor, in room 404, A man who had been unconscious for 91 days lay perfectly still. His brain activity had been minimal for months. The doctors had stopped being optimistic around day 30. But the machines monitoring him showed something the medical staff hadn't noticed yet. A pattern. Subtle. Barely there. But present. As if somewhere deep in the darkness of his coma, Raymond Morrison could hear something. Someone. A presence nearby that refused to leave. A promise being kept. The old man's voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. But everyone present heard it clearly. March 5th, 1971, he said. Cambodia. Operation Atlas Shrug. My team was ambushed. 12 men went in. 6 came out. Raymond Morrison took 3 rounds protecting me while I was trying to stop his sergeant from bleeding out. I performed field surgery on him for 8 hours while we waited for extraction. He looked at me when they finally loaded him on the helicopter, and he said, "Nomad never leaves anyone behind." The nickname hung in the air. Nomad. Dr. Nguyen's breath caught. Her father had told her about the nomads. The men who moved through the jungle like ghosts. The medics who appeared when you thought you were going to die. The quiet ones who never left anyone behind. I've been called a lot of things, the old man continued. Vagrant. Homeless. Crazy. But I've never been called a promise breaker. I'm not starting now. Raymond Morrison is in room 404. He's been unconscious for 91 days. And until he wakes up, I'm not going anywhere. Whitmore's finger hovered over the call button on his phone. But something had shifted in the air. The nurses who had been passing by had stopped. Marcus was still recording. Dr. Nguyen was staring at the old man with dawning recognition. "What's your name, sir?" she asked quietly. The old man hesitated. Then, with a small nod of acceptance, Vincent Shun. Retired. Former Special Forces medic. 5th Special Forces Group. And before you ask, yes, ma'am, I know I look like someone who belongs under a bridge instead of wearing a green beret. War and loss have a way of changing a man's circumstances, but they don't change his obligations. Whitmore's phone stayed in his hand, but he hadn't made the call yet. Something about the name Vincent Shun had stopped him. Or maybe it was the way Dr. Nguyen was looking at the old man now, like she was seeing something the rest of them couldn't. Special Forces, Whitmore said slowly. The skepticism was still there, but it had lost some of its edge. You expect us to believe that? Vincent's shoulders shifted slightly. A shrug that wasn't quite a shrug. I don't expect anything, sir. Belief is a choice. I'm simply answering the question I was asked. Marcus Webb moved closer, his phone still recording discreetly. He'd been an Army medic himself, though he'd never talk about it much. 3 tours in Iraq. He'd left the service with hands that shook sometimes and nightmares that never quite stopped. But he recognized something in the way this old man stood. The way he spoke. The economy of movement that came from years of training where wasted motion could get you killed. Dr. Nguyen crouched down slightly, bringing herself to eye level with Vincent. My father was rescued by American Special Forces in 1971, she said quietly. He was a village elder near the Cambodian border. The Viet Cong had marked him for execution. He said angels appeared from the jungle one night. Quiet men who moved like smoke. They took him and 43 others across the border to safety. He called them the men who kept promises. Vincent's jaw tightened. His eyes moved past her, through the glass doors of the hospital, toward the 4th floor where Raymond Morrison lay in his mechanical sleep. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I'm sure there were many operations, many teams. I couldn't say if I was there. But you could have been," she pressed gently. A long silence. Then, "Yes, ma'am, I could have been." The sky was lighter now. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the darkness was giving way to that gray pre-dawn twilight where everything exists in shadow. Vincent had seen this light 1,000 times, had learned to love it in his years on the street. It was the quiet hour, the hour between night and day when the world held its breath. He'd been living on the streets for 6 years now. Not because he had to. There were programs. The VA had beds. Shelters took veterans. But after Elena died, after the cancer took her in 8 brutal months while he held her hand and watched her fade, he couldn't bear to stay in their house. Couldn't walk past her chair. Couldn't see her coffee mug in the cabinet. couldn't exist in a space that screamed her absence. So he'd left, packed a single bag, taken his dog tags and the photograph of her smiling on their wedding day and the worn field medical guy that Raymond had given him 50 years ago, and he'd walked away from everything else. For the first year, he'd told himself it was temporary. A break, a chance to clear his head. But temporary became permanent. The house went to the bank. His small pension went unclaimed because he had no address. And Vincent Shun, who had saved 27 lives in combat, who had earned a Silver Star for valor and a Purple Heart for wounds, who had taught field medicine to 3 generations of Special Forces medics, became invisible. The city had 10,000 stories like his, maybe more, men and women who had served, who had given everything, who had come home to find that home didn't exist anymore. Some of them were broken by war, some by loss, some by the simple grinding weight of trying to fit into a world that had moved on without them. Vincent wasn't broken, not in the way people thought of breaking. He could still function, still moved with purpose, still maintain the discipline that had been drilled into him at Fort Bragg in 1968. He woke at 0500 every morning, folded his sleeping bag with hospital corners, washed in public restrooms, kept himself as clean and presentable as a man could when he owned 2 shirts and 1 pair of pants. But something in him had shifted the day Elena died. Some fundamental piece that held him to the world of addresses and bills and normalcy. He'd been a medic. His job was saving lives, and he failed to save the one that mattered most. So when word reached him 3 months ago that Raymond Morrison had been brought into City General with a massive stroke, unconscious, prognosis uncertain, Vincent had made a decision. He'd packed his sleeping bag and his few possessions, and he'd walked the 6 miles from the Morrison Street Bridge to the hospital. And he'd taken a position outside the main entrance. The staff had tried to run him off at first. Security, administration, even some of the doctors. But Vincent was respectful, quiet. He never asked for anything, never caused trouble. He simply existed. And every morning at 0600, when the shift change happened and there was a brief window of chaos, he would slip inside, take the stairs to the 4th floor, stand outside room 404 where the nurses who knew him would let him look through the window. Raymond Morrison lay there surrounded by machines, tubes running into his arms, a ventilator breathing for him, monitors tracking brain activity that the doctor said was minimal. The prognosis wasn't good. After 3 months, the likelihood of meaningful recovery was close to 0. But Vincent didn't care about prognosis. He cared about promises. And in a field in Cambodia in 1971, after Raymond had taken 3 bullets protecting him, after Vincent had performed battlefield surgery with shaking hands while mortars fell around them, after 8 hours of hell waiting for a helicopter that kept getting delayed, Raymond had grabbed his arm. His eyes had been clear despite the pain, despite the blood loss, despite everything. Nomad, Raymond had said. The call sign Vincent had earned because he never stayed in one place. Because he moved between teams wherever a medic was needed. Because he went where others wouldn't go. Never leaves anyone behind. Promise me. And Vincent had promised, with his hands still covered in Raymond's blood, with the bodies of their teammates cooling in the jungle around them. He promised. Now Whitmore was scrolling through his phone, probably looking up military records, probably trying to verify what this homeless man was claiming. Dr. Nguyen had straightened and was watching Vincent with a mix of respect and curiosity that made him uncomfortable. He didn't want respect, didn't want attention. He just wanted to be left alone to keep his vigil. Marcus stepped forward. "Chief," he said quietly, "I've been watching him for 3 months. He's never caused a problem, never asked for money, never bothered anyone. He just sits there." Whitmore looked up from his phone. "Hospital policy is clear," he said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. "No loitering." "He's not loitering," Marcus argued. "He's waiting. There's a difference." Vincent held up a hand. "It's all right," he said. "I don't want to cause trouble. I'll move to the public sidewalk. That's city property, not hospital property. I can wait there." It was 50 yards farther from the entrance, farther from the 4th floor window where he could sometimes see the nurses moving around Raymond's bed. But it was technically legal. And Vincent had learned long ago that you picked your battles carefully. He gathered his sleeping bag and the small backpack that held everything he owned in the world. As he moved, his jacket shifted again, and Dr. Nguyen caught another glimpse of the tattoo on his forearm. This time she saw more. The coordinates were clear now. 13.756 3 grado N, 107.056 8 grado E. Below that a date. March 5th, 71. And beneath the numbers, rendered in intricate detail despite decades of fading, a green beret insignia with a Khmer script beneath it that she recognized from her father's stories. "Wait," she said. "Please, just wait one moment." She pulled out her own phone and dialed quickly. When someone answered, she spoke in rapid Vietnamese. Vincent understood some of it, enough to catch the words father, soldier, Cambodia, promise. When she hung up, her eyes were bright. "My father wants to meet you," she said. "He's coming here. He said if you're who he thinks you are, he owes you his life." Vincent's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, with respect, I doubt I'm who he thinks I am. We evacuated a lot of people from that region. A lot of teams were involved, but not a lot of medics named Nomad," she said quietly. The word hit him like a physical thing. He hadn't heard anyone call him that in years. Decades. The name belonged to a different life. A different version of himself who had believed he could save everyone. Who had tried to save everyone. Who had failed more often than he'd succeeded, but had never stopped trying. "How did you know that name?" he asked. "Because my father never forgot it," she replied. "Because he spent 50 years wondering what happened to the American medic who carried him 6 kilometers with a broken leg. Who set his fracture under fire. Who promised him he would see his children grow up. And my father kept that memory alive. Told me the stories. Taught me that some debts can never be repaid, only honored." Vincent's hands were trembling slightly now. Not from fear, not from cold, from the weight of memory crashing over him. He remembered that night. Remembered the village elder who had insisted on walking despite the break. Remembered setting the leg with nothing but field supplies and determination. Remembered promising the man that he would survive to see his grandchildren. "Your father made it to America?" Vincent asked. "He made it to America," Dr. Nguyen confirmed. "Became a citizen, raised 4 children, has 11 grandchildren now, and every year on March 5th, he lights a candle for the men who saved him, the men who kept their promise." The sun broke over the horizon then. Golden light spilled across the hospital parking lot. The day shift was arriving in force now. Cars pulling in, people hurrying toward the entrance with coffee cups and tired eyes. Another day beginning. Another rotation of the endless cycle of healing and hurt that filled every hospital in every city in the world. Whitmore's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his face went pale. Marcus, still recording, caught the change in expression. Caught the moment when doubt became certainty. When skepticism became something else entirely. "The police aren't coming," Whitmore said slowly. He looked at Vincent with new eyes. "I just got a message from the hospital administrator. Apparently, there's a video of this conversation already making its rounds on social media. Someone posted it to a veterans group. It's being shared." Marcus lowered his phone slightly, knowing he'd been caught. Vincent just nodded. That was the way of the modern world. Everything recorded. Everything shared. Privacy was a memory from a different era. Dr. Nguyen's phone rang. She answered it and listened for a moment. Then she looked at Vincent with tears in her eyes. "My father is here," she said. "He's in the parking lot. He says he won't come inside until he knows if you'll see him. He says he doesn't want to intrude on a promise being kept." Vincent stood very still. The sleeping bag was rolled under his arm. His backpack hung from one shoulder. He was a homeless man, a vagrant, someone society had decided didn't matter. But the way Dr. Nguyen was looking at him now, the way Marcus was standing at attention without realizing it, the way even Whitmore had gone quiet, suggested that maybe, just maybe, the truth was more complicated than appearances suggested. "Tell him," Vincent said quietly, "that I would be honored to see him. But first, I need to check on Raymond. I need to make sure he's all right." And with that, Vincent Chun turned and walked toward the hospital entrance. Not running, not hurrying, just moving with the calm certainty of a man who had made a promise 52 years ago and who had no intention of breaking it now. Nobody stopped him this time. Whitmore stood frozen by the entrance, his phone still in his hand, showing the viral video that was spreading through veteran networks like wildfire. Dr. Nguyen followed Vincent at a respectful distance, her own phone pressed to her ear as she spoke softly to her father. Marcus trailed behind, no longer recording, but unable to look away from what was unfolding. The elevator ride to the 4th floor was silent. Vincent stood at the back, his weathered hands gripping the rolled sleeping bag. His reflection in the polished metal doors showed what everyone else saw. An old man, worn clothing, duct tape boots, the kind of person you stepped around on the sidewalk without making eye contact. But Dr. Nguyen saw something different now. She saw the way he held himself despite the exhaustion. The way his eyes tracked the floor numbers with the focused attention of someone who had spent a lifetime staying aware of his surroundings. The way his breathing remained steady and controlled, even though she could see the emotion working in his jaw. The ICU was quiet at this hour. The overnight shift was finishing their charting. The day shift was just arriving, getting report, preparing for the long hours ahead. A few nurses glanced up as Vincent stepped off the elevator, and several of them smiled slightly. They knew him, the quiet man who appeared every morning like clockwork, who never disrupted, who would stand outside room 404 for exactly 10 minutes before leaving without a word. Room 404 was at the end of the hall. Vincent walked toward it with the measured pace of someone approaching something sacred. Through the window, he could see Raymond Morrison's still form beneath white sheets. The ventilator rose and fell with mechanical precision. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Everything looked exactly as it had yesterday, and the day before, and every day for the past 91 mornings. Vincent stopped at the window. His hand came up slowly and pressed against the glass. His lips moved silently, words that had become a daily ritual. "Still here, brother. Still waiting. You wake up when you're ready." A nurse emerged from the room. Her name tag read Jennifer Park. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and the sort of gentle competence that came from decades of caring for the critically ill. She'd worked in this ICU for 23 years, and she'd seen every variation of family vigil imaginable. But something about Vincent had always struck her as different. "Mr. Chun," she said warmly, "you're here early today." "Had some complications at the entrance, ma'am," Vincent replied. "Nothing serious." Jennifer's eyes moved past him to where Dr. Nguyen stood watching. She'd heard the commotion on the radio. Security calling for backup. Something about removing a vagrant. She hadn't connected it to Vincent until this moment. Her expression shifted from pleasant to protective. "Chief Whitmore tried to have you arrested," she said flatly. "It wasn't a question. He was doing his job, ma'am. Hospital policy is clear." "Hospital policy," Jennifer said with an edge in her voice, "doesn't account for loyalty like yours." She glanced back through the window at Raymond. His vitals have been stable. No change overnight. But I swear sometimes his brain activity spikes right around 0600. Right around the time you usually arrive. Vincent's hand tightened against the glass. "That would be coincidence, ma'am." "Maybe," Jennifer said. "Or maybe some part of him knows you're here. Knows you kept your promise." Dr. Nguyen stepped forward. "Nurse Park, I need to ask about visiting protocols. We have someone arriving who has a connection to Mr. Chun. My father. He's a refugee who was rescued by Mr. Chen's unit in 1971. I'd like to bring him up." Jennifer's eyebrows rose. She looked at Vincent with new understanding. "Your unit," she repeated. "Then you really were special forces." Vincent's jaw worked. The words seemed to cost him something. "5th Special Forces Group, ma'am. Long time ago. Different life." The elevator chimed. Doors opened. An elderly Vietnamese man stepped out, leaning on a cane, but moving with determined purpose. He was Dr. Nguyen's height, slight of build, with white hair and eyes that had seen more than most. He wore a simple cardigan and pressed slacks. Around his neck hung a jade pendant that caught the fluorescent light. The moment he saw Vincent, he stopped. His free hand came up to his chest. His eyes filled with tears. And then he spoke a single word in Vietnamese. A word that meant ghost. Spirit. The thing that appears when needed most. Vincent turned slowly. When he saw the old man, his entire body went rigid. Not with fear, with recognition, with the weight of memory crashing down like a physical force. He knew this face. Older now, weathered by time, but the same. The village elder with a broken leg. The man who had refused to leave his family behind. The man Vincent had carried for 6 kilometers through hostile territory, while mortars fell and bullets sang through the jungle canopy. Mr. Tran, Vincent said quietly. The name came from some deep place in his memory. John Duke Ming. The old man's tears spilled over. He moved forward, closing the distance between them with surprising speed despite the cane. When he reached Vincent, he didn't offer his hand. Instead, he bowed, deep, the kind of bow that conveyed respect and gratitude and a debt that could never be repaid. You remember my name? Tran said in accented but clear English. After 52 years. You remember. I remember everyone, Vincent replied. His voice was rough. Everyone we saved. Everyone we lost. Tran straightened and reached out to grip Vincent's arm. Not the handshake of strangers, but the grasp of brothers. His fingers found the tattoo through the worn jacket fabric, and he squeezed gently. You promised me I would see my grandchildren. You kept that promise. I have 11 now. 11 reasons to light candles every March 5th. Vincent's eyes were bright, but no tears fell. I'm glad, sir. Truly. And you, Tran said, looking at Vincent's worn appearance with obvious concern. What happened to you? Where's your family? Where's your home? The questions hung in the sterile air of the ICU hallway. Other nurses had stopped their work now. A doctor making rounds had paused to watch. Marcus Webb stood at the elevator, still present, still bearing witness to whatever this was becoming. Vincent's eyes moved back to the window, to Raymond Morrison's motionless form. My family's gone, sir. Lost my wife 6 years ago. Never had children. As for home, he gestured vaguely at his sleeping bag. This is sufficient. I don't need much. This is not sufficient, Tran said firmly. You saved my life. You gave me everything. Family, future, freedom. And you sleep on concrete? It's temporary, Vincent said. Just until Raymond wakes up. And if he doesn't wake up? Dr. Nguyen asked gently. What then? Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then, he'll wake up. He has to, because I promised him I wouldn't leave. And if there's one thing Raymond Morrison knows about me, it's that Nomad keeps his promises. The call sign again. Spoken aloud. Jennifer Park's hand went to her mouth. She'd heard stories. Her own father had served in Vietnam, had told her about the medics who appeared from nowhere, who saved lives that shouldn't have been saved, who earned names that became legends whispered around base camps. Nomad, she repeated. You're that Nomad? Vincent's shoulders lifted in that almost shrug again. I was assigned that call sign, yes ma'am. Long time ago. My father spoke of you, Jennifer said. He was air cavalry. Said there was a medic who would show up at impossible places, who once performed a field amputation during a firefight and kept the patient alive for 14 hours until they could get to a surgical unit. He said you were the one every pilot wanted on their bird because if you were there, people survived. The elevator chime began. This time when the doors opened, 3 more people stepped out. 2 were elderly men in baseball caps bearing unit insignias. The third was a woman in her 40s wearing an army jacket. They looked around the ICU hallway, spotted Vincent, and stopped as if they'd hit a wall. Is it true? One of the men asked. His voice shook. Is that really Nomad? Marcus Webb stepped forward. How did you know he was here? The video, the woman said. It's everywhere. Every veteran group in the state has shared it. Someone recognized his face from old photos. Someone else confirmed the details about Cambodia. Word spread. She looked at Vincent with something approaching awe. We drove 90 miles. We had to see if it was really him. Vincent looked trapped, cornered not by hostility, but by recognition he didn't want, by attention he'd spent 6 years avoiding. His hand tightened on his sleeping bag, and for a moment it looked like he might bolt, might disappear down the stairwell and vanish back into the anonymous streets where nobody knew his name or his history. But then Raymond's monitor beeped. Just the normal rhythm. The same sound it had been making for 91 days. But it was enough. Enough to anchor Vincent in place. Enough to remind him why he was here. Why he couldn't leave. He turned back to the window, back to his brother lying in mechanical sleep, and he pressed his hand against the glass again. Tran moved to stand beside him, put his own weathered hand on Vincent's shoulder. Together the two old men stood looking at a third old man who might never wake. 3 lives connected by war and promise, and the unbreakable bonds formed in the worst moments humans could endure. "How long will you wait?" Tran asked quietly. "As long as it takes," Vincent replied. "I made a promise. In Cambodia, when he took those bullets protecting me, when I held his life in my hands for 8 hours, I promised him I would never leave anyone behind. And I'm not starting now." Dr. Nguyen was crying openly now. The newly arrived veterans stood in respectful silence. Jennifer Park had gone back into Raymond's room and was checking his vitals, but her own eyes were wet. And in the bed, beneath the white sheets, surrounded by machines and monitors and the antiseptic smell of hospital care, Raymond Morrison lay perfectly still. His brain activity remained minimal. His prognosis unchanged. The doctors would say there was no awareness, no consciousness, no ability to perceive the world around him. But deep in whatever dark place his mind had retreated to, something stirred. A presence, a warmth, a voice that had been calling him every morning for 91 days. A promise being kept, a brother refusing to break faith. The neural pathways that controlled waking were damaged. The connections that should have fired didn't fire. But somewhere in the vast mystery of the human brain, in the places science couldn't quite measure or explain, Raymond Morrison was hearing something. Someone. And that someone was telling him, in a voice rough with grief and loyalty and unwavering determination, that he wasn't alone, that he'd never been alone, that Nomad was still here, still waiting, still keeping the promise made 52 years ago in blood and fire, and the desperate hope that both of them would survive to tell the story. Whitmore appeared at the end of the hallway. He'd taken the stairs. His face was flushed from exertion and something else, something that looked like shame. He stopped when he saw the gathering, saw Vincent surrounded by veterans who had driven hours just to see him, saw Tran with his hand on Vincent's shoulder like a father blessing a son. The security chief opened his mouth, then closed it. Whatever he'd come to say died unspoken, because even Gerald Whitmore, with all his rules and policies and territorial certainty, could recognize that he was witnessing something beyond his authority to control, something that transcended hospital regulations and visiting hours and the comfortable boundaries of procedure. He was watching a promise being kept, and that was sacred ground where even security chiefs feared to tread. The hospital administrator arrived 20 minutes later. She was a stern woman in her early 60s named Catherine Walsh, who had run City General for the past 12 years with an iron hand and zero tolerance for disruption. She stepped off the elevator, saw the gathering in the ICU hallway, and her expression went from irritated to confused to something approaching alarm. "What is happening here?" she demanded. "This is an intensive care unit, not a convention center." Jennifer Park stepped forward. "Ms. Walsh, these are visitors for room 404. They have a connection to Mr. Morrison's emergency contact." "The homeless man?" Walsh's eyes found Vincent standing at the window. "The one Chief Whitmore tried to have removed this morning? His name is Vincent Chun," Dr. Nguyen said quietly but firmly. "And he's not homeless by circumstance. He's homeless by choice. There's a difference." Walsh's jaw tightened. "I'm aware of the video that's circulating. I've had 17 phone calls in the past hour. News stations, veteran organizations, even a call from a state senator's office, all asking about the Special Forces veteran we're allegedly mistreating." She looked at Vincent directly. "Is it true? Are you who they say you are?" Vincent turned from the window, faced her with that same quiet dignity he'd shown Whitmore. "Ma'am, I'm a man keeping a promise to a friend. That's all that matters." "That's not an answer," Walsh pressed. "With respect, ma'am, it's the only answer I have to give." One of the newly arrived veterans stepped forward. His cap bore the insignia of the 5th Special Forces Group. His name was Thomas Reeves, and he had a Purple Heart pin on his jacket. "Ma'am, I serve in the same group as Mr. Chun. Different era, but the stories about Nomad were still being told when I went through training in 1989. The medic who never lost a patient if there was any chance at all. The man who would walk through fire to reach wounded soldiers. He's a legend. Legends don't sleep on concrete, Walsh said bluntly. Reeve smiled sadly. This one does. Because that's the kind of man he is. Puts others before himself. Always has. Vincent's hand moved unconsciously to his jacket pocket. Inside was the photograph. The one he carried everywhere. Elena on their wedding day. Her smile bright enough to light the darkest night. Her hand in his. Both of them young and full of hope and certainty that nothing could break what they'd built together. Cancer had taught him differently. Had shown him that all the training and skill and determination in the world meant nothing against cells that turned traitor in the body of someone you loved. He'd sat beside her hospital bed for 8 months. Had watched her fade. Had held her hand and told her stories about Cambodia and Raymond and all the men whose lives he'd saved because he needed her to believe that he could save her too. But he couldn't. And when she died, something in him had died with her. The part that believed in permanence. In homes and addresses and the ordinary rhythms of civilian life. He tried to stay in their house. Had lasted 3 weeks before the silence became unbearable. Before every empty chair and used coffee mug became an accusation. So he packed a bag and walked out. Left the door unlocked. Left everything behind except the memories he couldn't escape no matter how far he walked. Ms. Walsh. Trent spoke up, his accented voice carrying unexpected authority. This man saved my life in 1971. He carried me 6 kilometers with a broken leg while people shot at us. He promised I would see my grandchildren. I have 11 grandchildren now because of his promise. If he says he will wait for his brother, then he will wait. And you should let him. Walsh's expression softened slightly. She wasn't heartless, just practical, just trying to run a hospital with limited resources and unlimited need. I understand loyalty, she said, but we have policies for a reason. We can't have people sleeping in our hallways or camping outside our doors. Then give them a room, Dr. Nguyen said. We have family suites, guest accommodations for relatives of long-term patients. Give him one of those. Those are for family members, Walsh countered. He is family, Jennifer Park said from the doorway of Raymond's room. Maybe not by blood, but by something stronger. She gestured to the monitors behind her. I've been watching his vitals for 3 months. And I'm telling you, there's a pattern. Every morning around 0600, right when Mr. Chen usually arrives, Raymond's brain activity increases. Not much, but enough that I've started documenting it. That's coincidental, Walsh said, but there was less certainty in her voice. Maybe, Jennifer agreed. Or maybe some part of him knows. Knows his brother is here. Knows the promise is being kept. Vincent's eyes had gone back to Raymond, to the still form that had once been the strongest man he'd ever known. Raymond Morrison had been built like a bear, hence the nickname. 6'4" and 240 pounds of muscle and determination. Point man because nobody was braver. Protector because nobody was more loyal. The day he'd taken those 3 bullets, he'd thrown himself in front of Vincent without hesitation. Had seen the RPG coming and made a choice in the half-second before impact. Save himself or save the medic. And Raymond had chosen the medic. Because in his calculation, a good medic was worth more than a good point man. Could save more lives. Could make more difference. Vincent had hated him for it. Even as he'd worked frantically to stop the bleeding. Even as he'd performed field surgery with shaking hands while mortars fell and the jungle burned around them. He'd hated Raymond for making that choice. For deciding that Vincent's life was worth more than his own. But he'd saved him anyway. Had kept him alive through 8 hours of hell. Had refused to let him die no matter how bad it got. And when the helicopter finally came, when they'd loaded Raymond aboard with plasma running and bandages soaked through, Raymond had grabbed his arm with blood-slick fingers and whispered those words that became a prophecy. Nomad never leaves anyone behind. Now it was Vincent's turn to keep Raymond alive, to refuse to let him slip away into the dark, to maintain the vigil until either Raymond woke or Vincent's own body gave out. Whichever came first. Walsh pulled out her phone, made a call, spoke in clipped tones for 2 minutes while everyone waited in silence. When she hung up, She looked at Vincent with an expression that mixed resignation and respect. "You can stay," she said. "We'll arrange a guest room on this floor. You'll have access to showers and meals. But I need you to agree to a few conditions." Vincent nodded. "Yes, ma'am. You maintain the same respectful behavior you've shown for the past 3 months. You don't disrupt the unit. You don't interfere with medical care. And if the medical team determines that Mr. Morrison's condition is deteriorating or that continued life support isn't medically appropriate, you'll accept their professional judgment." The last condition hit Vincent like a blow. He'd known it might come to that. 3 months was already far longer than most coma patients lasted on ventilators. The doctors had been gentle but clear in their assessments. Brain damage was extensive. The likelihood of meaningful recovery was minimal. Eventually, there would be conversations about withdrawal of support, about letting Raymond go peacefully. But Vincent wasn't ready for that conversation. Might never be ready for it. "I understand the first 3 conditions, ma'am," he said carefully. "The 4th one I need to think about." Walsh studied him. "That's fair," she said finally. "We're not at that point yet anyway. But when we are, we'll need to discuss it." The gathered veterans began to relax. Reeves clapped Vincent on the shoulder. Others murmured approval. Tran squeezed Vincent's arm again, his eyes bright with satisfaction at this small victory. But Vincent felt no victory, only the weight of knowing that the promise he'd made might eventually require him to let go, to leave Raymond behind after all. And that possibility, that potential failure, was a wound that cut deeper than any bullet or shrapnel ever had. Jennifer Park emerged from Raymond's room holding a chart. "Mr. Chun," she said, "I know you usually only stay for 10 minutes. But today, if you'd like, you could sit with him. Talk to him. I'll get you a chair." Vincent hesitated. In 3 months, he'd never actually entered the room, had only ever watched through the glass. Maintaining distance felt safer somehow, less painful. But now, with permission granted and witnesses waiting and the weight of expectation pressing down, he couldn't refuse. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. "I'd like that." Jennifer brought a chair. Vincent set down his sleeping bag and backpack, stripped off his worn jacket, revealing the faded green t-shirt beneath. The tattoo on his forearm was fully visible now in the fluorescent light. The coordinates, the date, the green beret insignia, and below it all, rendered in smaller script, a list of names. 10 names. The brothers who hadn't made it home from Cambodia. He sat down beside Raymond's bed, reached out slowly, and took his friend's hand. The skin was warm but unresponsive. No esquisse, no recognition. Just flesh maintained by machines and medical intervention. "Hey, Bear," Vincent said softly. His voice was rough with emotion he'd been holding back for 91 days. "It's me. It's Nomad. I'm here. I've been here every day, and I'm not leaving." The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. The ventilator hissed. Outside the room, Dr. Nguyen had her arm around her father. The veterans stood in respectful silence. Walsh had moved away to handle the administrative chaos this situation was creating. And Vincent sat holding his brother's hand, whispering stories of Cambodia and Elena and the life he'd lived in the 52 years since that terrible day when half their team had died and the other half had survived only because one medic refused to accept defeat. "I'm sorry I disappeared," Vincent continued. "Sorry I let myself fall apart after Elena died. Sorry I didn't reach you sooner when you had your stroke. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. You hear me, Bear? I'm keeping the promise. Nomad never leaves anyone behind." Deep in the darkness of his coma, in the place where Raymond Morrison's consciousness had retreated, something flickered. Not enough to register on the monitors. Not enough for the doctors to measure. But something, a spark, a response to the voice that had called him every morning for 91 days. The voice of the man who had saved his life and who was now begging him to return the favor. "Wake up when you're ready, brother," Vincent whispered. "But know that I'll be here whether you wake up tomorrow or never." That's the promise. That's what Nomad does. He stays. The guest room they gave Vincent was on the 4th floor, 3 doors down from Raymond's ICU room. It was small but clean. A single bed with white sheets. A private bathroom with a shower. A window that looked out over the city where he'd spent 6 years invisible among the crowds. Vincent stood in the doorway for a long time before entering. The last time he'd slept in a real bed had been the night before Elena died. The hospice bed in their living room, because she couldn't manage the stairs anymore. He'd pulled a chair beside it and held her hand through those final hours. Had felt the moment when her breathing changed. When it stopped, he'd walked out of that house the next morning and hadn't slept indoors since. Jennifer Park appeared behind him, carrying fresh towels. She understood his hesitation without him having to explain it. Sometimes healing required discomfort, required facing the things you'd been running from. "The shower's hot," she said gently. "There's soap and shampoo. Clean clothes in the closet if you need them. And the cafeteria will send up meals if you want. But there's no pressure. This room is yours for as long as you need it." Vincent accepted the towels. "Thank you, ma'am. This is very kind." "It's the least we can do," Jennifer replied. "And please, call me Jennifer. You've been watching over Raymond for 3 months. Your family here now, whether administration wants to admit it or not." After she left, Vincent set his backpack on the bed and unpacked his few possessions. The photograph of Elena went on the nightstand. His dog tags hung over the bedpost. The worn medical field guide sat beside the photograph. Everything he owned in the world arranged in a space of 3 square feet. He showered for the first time in a week. The hot water felt like a punishment at first. Too much comfort, too much ease. But gradually his muscles relaxed. The dirt and grime of street living washed away. When he emerged and looked in the mirror, he barely recognized the man staring back. Older, thinner, but somehow more himself than he'd been in years. The clean clothes fit reasonably well. Donated items probably left by other families. He dressed slowly and then returned to Raymond's room. Sat in the chair Jennifer had provided. Took his friend's unresponsive hand again. The afternoon passed in quiet vigil. Nurses came and went, checking monitors, adjusting medications, changing 4 bags. Each one greeted Vincent by name now. News had spread through the hospital. The homeless man outside was actually a decorated war hero, a legendary medic, a man keeping a promise that was older than most of the staff. Around 3 in the afternoon, a man in his early 40s entered. He wore the uniform of an army colonel, crisp and decorated. His name tag read Hartford. He moved with the bearing of someone who'd spent a lifetime in service. When he saw Vincent, he stopped and came to attention. "Mr. Chun," he said formally. "Colonel James Hartford. I serve in 5th Group from 98 to 2012. Your name was still spoken in the ready rooms. Still taught as a case study in field medicine. It's an honor to meet you, sir." Vincent stood slowly. Not attention, but respectfully. The rank difference meant nothing to him. He'd been enlisted, had never wanted the responsibility of command. But Hartford's respect was genuine and deserved acknowledgement. "Colonel," Vincent said, "thank you for coming." Hartford relaxed slightly. "I came as soon as I heard. Drove 3 hours from Fort Bragg. When word reached our veteran liaison office that Nomad had been found, that he was homeless and maintaining a vigil for Raymond Morrison, I had to see it for myself." He looked at the man in the bed. "Bear Morrison. I read about him too. The point man who took 3 rounds protecting his medic. The one who survived because Nomad wouldn't let him die. That's one version," Vincent said quietly. "The other version is that he never should have taken those rounds in the first place. Should have saved himself." Hartford shook his head. "With respect, sir, that's not how brothers operate. You know that better than anyone." A silence fell. Hartford pulled up another chair and sat. For several minutes, they simply existed together in the presence of the comatose man who had once been a legend in his own right. "I brought something," Hartford said finally. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a file folder. "Declassified documents from Operation Atlas Shrug. Took me 2 years to get them released. Thought you might want to see them." Vincent's hands trembled slightly as he accepted the folder. Inside were after-action reports, casualty lists, commendation citations, photographs of young men in jungle fatigues, faces painted, eyes hard with the knowledge of what they were about to attempt. There was Vincent at 23, lean and fierce, medical kit slung over his shoulder. standing beside Raymond, who towered over him, grinning at the camera like they were heading to a party instead of an unauthorized cross-border operation that could get them court-martialed or killed. "We lost 12 good men that day," Hartford said, reading from one of the reports. 6 killed in action, 6 wounded but recovered. The mission was technically a failure. The intelligence target was already gone when you arrived. But the after-action assessment noted that without the medics' actions, the casualty count would have been total. Every wounded man survived because of field care that exceeded anything in the standard protocols. Vincent's finger traced the list of names. The 6 who hadn't come home. He knew them by heart, had their names tattooed on his arm. But seeing them in official documentation, seeing the clinical summary of how each one died, open wounds that had never properly healed. Jackson took shrapnel to the throat. He said softly, "Bled out in 90 seconds. Nothing I could do." Peterson was hit in the head, dead before he fell. Rodriguez made it to the helicopter, but died in surgery at the base hospital. Aneurysm I missed. Should have caught it. "You can't save everyone," Hartford said gently. "Doesn't make it easier to lose them," Vincent replied. Hartford pulled out another document. This one had a red classification stamp across the top, now faded with declassification. It was Vincent's Silver Star citation. He'd never actually seen it, had refused to attend the ceremony, had been out on another operation when they tried to present it formally. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an armed enemy, Hartford read aloud. Specialist Vincent Shun, while serving as medical specialist with Special Operations Team Alpha 7, distinguished himself by exceptionally valorous actions during combat operations in Kampong Province. When his team came under intense enemy fire resulting in multiple casualties, Specialist Shun repeatedly exposed himself to hostile fire to reach wounded soldiers. Despite being wounded himself, he performed life-saving medical procedures under the most adverse conditions, maintaining the lives of 4 critically wounded soldiers through 8 hours of sustained combat until evacuation could be effected. His actions were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself and the United States Army. Vincent's eyes had closed halfway through the reading. He'd heard the words before, had them recited to him by commanders who wanted to make sure he understood his own heroism. But they'd always felt hollow, like someone describing events that had happened to a different person in a different life. "I wasn't wounded," he said when Hartford finished. "That's an error in the citation." Hartford checked the document. "It says here you sustained shrapnel wounds to the head and shoulder." Vincent touched the scar on his temple. "Minor. Didn't affect my ability to function. Not worth mentioning in the same breath as what happened to the others." "That's not how medals work, sir," Hartford said with a slight smile. "You don't get to decide if your wounds count." A nurse entered to check Raymond's vitals. She worked around them quietly, professional, and efficient. When she finished, she paused and looked at Vincent with obvious curiosity. "Is it true what they're saying?" she asked. "That you've been living on the streets for 6 years?" Vincent nodded. "Yes, ma'am. But why? If you're a Silver Star recipient, the VA has programs, benefits, support systems." "I'm aware, ma'am," Vincent said gently. "Il chose differently." The nurse wanted to ask more, but something in his expression stopped her. She left quietly, closing the door behind her. Hartford set the folder aside. "Mr. Chun, I need to ask you something. And I want you to know this comes from a place of respect and concern, not judgment." Vincent waited. "What's your plan here?" Hartford continued. "You wait for Raymond to wake up. Let's say he does. What then? You've been off the grid for 6 years. No address, no income, no support network beyond the street community. How do you rebuild?" Vincent's eyes moved to the photograph on Raymond's bedside table. Someone had placed it there. Raymond's own family photo. A wife who had died 15 years ago. No children, no siblings, just Raymond, alone in the world except for the brothers he'd served with. "I don't know," Vincent admitted. "Haven't thought past keeping the promise." "That's what I figured," Hartford said. "So here's what I'm offering. The VA has a new program. Well, not new, but expanded. For veterans who've been living rough. It's not traditional shelter. It's a reintegration house, run by veterans for veterans. No bureaucracy. No paperwork unless you want it. Just a place to land while you figure out what's next. Vincent shook his head slowly. I appreciate the offer, Colonel, but I can't leave. Not while Raymond needs me. I'm not asking you to leave, Hartford said. I'm asking you to consider that keeping Raymond alive might require you to stay alive too. Healthy, functional, ready to help him recover if he wakes up. The logic was sound, but Vincent's resistance ran deeper than logic. It ran to the core of who he'd become in the 6 years since Elena's death. Someone who existed at the margins, who wanted nothing, who needed nothing, who maintained one single purpose and let everything else fall away. Let me think about it, Vincent said finally. Fair enough, Hartford replied. He stood and extended his hand. Vincent took it. The handshake was firm. The grip of men who understood what promises meant, what oaths required, what duty demanded even when it cost everything. After Hartford left, Vincent sat alone with Raymond again. The sun was setting outside the window, the golden light that marked the transition from day to night, the hour when the world shifted gears, when possibilities narrowed and choices became clearer. What do I do, Bear? Vincent asked the still form in the bed. You were always the one with the answers. Always knew the right play. I'm lost here, brother. Elena's gone. You're here, but not here. And I don't know how to be anything except what I became. The man who sleeps outside, who owns nothing, who wants nothing except to keep one promise. The monitors beeped. The ventilator hissed. No answer came because no answer could come from a man trapped in the darkness of his own damaged brain. But Vincent stayed anyway, holding Raymond's hand, watching the monitors, waiting for the miracle that medicine said was impossible, but that faith insisted might still come. Because Nomad never left anyone behind. And if waiting required him to sit in this chair for the next 6 months or 6 years, then that's what he would do. The promise didn't have an expiration date. It didn't come with conditions or caveats. It simply existed, absolute and unbreakable, the way all the best promises did. The video had gone viral by the time the sun set. 2 million views, shared across every veteran platform. Comments flooding in from soldiers who had heard the legends, from families who had lost loved ones and found comfort in the story of a man who refused to abandon his brother, from civilians who needed to believe that loyalty like this still existed in the world. Marcus Webb sat in the hospital cafeteria, scrolling through the responses on his phone. He'd posted the video with a simple caption: homeless vet maintaining vigil for comatose platoon brother. Hospital security tried to remove him. This is what loyalty looks like. The response had been overwhelming. News crews were calling the hospital. Reporters wanted interviews. A fundraising campaign had started without Vincent's knowledge or permission. Someone had already raised $40,000 for his care. Dr. Nguyen found Marcus at his table. Her shift had ended an hour ago, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Something significant was happening here. Something that transcended the ordinary rhythms of medical care and hospital routine. Have you seen the comments? Marcus asked, turning his phone toward her. She read through them. Veterans identifying themselves by unit and era, sharing their own stories of the brothers they'd lost, the promises they'd made, the wounds that never healed no matter how many years passed. And threaded through all of it, a single repeated question. How can we help? You won't want help, Dr. Nguyen said. My father tried to offer him money earlier. Vincent refused, said he didn't need anything except for Raymond to wake up. Maybe he doesn't get to decide, Marcus replied. Sometimes people need to give help as much as others need to receive it. Sometimes that's part of the healing too. Upstairs in Raymond's room, Vincent sat in the gathering darkness. He hadn't turned on the lights. The glow from the monitors provided enough illumination. Outside the window, the city was coming alive with evening lights. Thousands of people moving through their lives, eating dinner, watching television, tucking children into bed. The ordinary miracle of existence that Vincent had walked away from 6 years ago. Jennifer Park entered quietly and flipped on a small lamp. She carried a tray with food from the cafeteria. Soup, bread, coffee. Nothing fancy but hot and substantial. You need to eat, she said, setting it on the rolling table beside his chair. Thank you, ma'am, Vincent replied. but I'm not hungry. Jennifer sat in the chair Colonel Hartford had occupied earlier. Mr. Chun, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without arguing or deflecting. Can you do that? Vincent's eyes met hers. Yes, ma'am. I've been an ICU nurse for 23 years, Jennifer began. I've seen every kind of vigil imaginable. Families who stay for hours. Some who stay for days. I once had a wife who sat beside her husband's bed for 6 weeks straight until he passed. But I have never, in all my years, seen anyone maintain the kind of vigil you've kept. 3 months on concrete. Zen. Cold. Never asking for anything. Never causing trouble. Just being present. Vincent said nothing. Just waited. What you're doing is extraordinary, Jennifer continued. But it's also destroying you. I can see it. The weight you've lost. The way you move like everything hurts. The exhaustion in your eyes. You're running on fumes and willpower. And at some point, that's going to give out. I made a promise, Vincent said quietly. I know, Jennifer acknowledged. And I respect that more than I can say. But here's what I need you to understand. If Raymond wakes up, and there's still a chance he might, he's going to need extensive rehabilitation. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy if the stroke affected his language centers. He's going to need support for months or even years. And if you've destroyed yourself maintaining this vigil, you won't be able to help him through what comes next. The logic was irrefutable. Vincent knew she was right. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally were different things entirely. What would you have me do? He asked. Accept help, Jennifer said simply. The room they gave you. Use it. Sleep in a real bed. Eat regular meals. Let Colonel Hartford connect you with the reintegration program. Get yourself stable so that when Raymond needs you, you're actually capable of being there for him. Vincent's hand tightened on Raymond's unresponsive fingers. That feels like leaving him. You'd be 3 doors away, Jennifer countered, and you could visit as often as you want. But you'd also be taking care of yourself, honoring the promise by making sure you survive long enough to keep it. A sound from the hallway drew their attention. Voices raised in what sounded like an argument. Jennifer stood and moved to the door. When she opened it, they could hear Whitmore's voice cutting through the evening quiet of the ICU. I don't care if he's a war hero or the president himself. We have protocols. We have rules. And this situation is creating chaos. News crews in the parking lot. Reporters trying to sneak onto the floor. This is a hospital, not a circus. Catherine Walsh's voice responded, calmer but firm. Chief Whitmore, I understand your concerns. But this situation is beyond security protocols now. This is about doing what's right. What's right is maintaining order, Whitmore shot back. Vincent stood slowly, moved to the doorway where Jennifer stood watching. Down the hall, he could see Whitmore gesturing emphatically while Walsh listened with her arms crossed. Several nurses had stopped their work to observe. The tension was palpable. This is my fault, Vincent said quietly. I should go. Jennifer grabbed his arm. No, you should stay. This isn't about you breaking rules. This is about the hospital figuring out how to respond to something that doesn't fit neatly into policy manuals. Whitmore noticed them in the doorway. His face flushed darker. There he is, the cause of all this disruption. You know there are 3 news vans outside? Reporters trying to get statements from staff? This is completely unacceptable. Vincent stepped into the hallway. Chief Whitmore, with respect, if my presence is causing problems for the hospital, I can leave. I never wanted to create difficulties. Whitmore seemed taken aback by the directness. You'd actually leave? After all this? To protect the hospital's ability to function and care for patients? Yes, sir. I would find another way to keep my promise that doesn't interfere with operations here. The hallway went silent. Even Whitmore seemed at a loss for words. Walsh's expression shifted from stern to something approaching respect. That won't be necessary, she said firmly. Mr. Chun, you're not the problem here. The problem is that we've built systems designed to process the ordinary. And what you're doing isn't ordinary. It's exceptional. And we need to figure out how to honor that without compromising patient care. I've already figured it out, a new voice interjected. They all turned. Dr. Nguyen stood at the nurse's station holding her tablet. She'd been working on something for the past hour. Something that might bridge the gap between Vincent's needs and the hospital's requirements. I've drafted a proposal, she continued, walking toward the group. We designate Mr. Chun as a registered long-term visitor for Mr. Morrison. Give him an official badge. Set visiting hours that work with our floor schedule. And we establish him as the primary contact for any medical decisions if Raymond's condition changes. He's not legal next of kin, Whitmore objected. Raymond Morrison has no living family, Dr. Nguyen countered. His emergency contact form lists Vincent Chun. We couldn't locate Mr. Chun initially because he was homeless, but now we can. Legally, he's the closest thing Raymond has to family. We should treat him accordingly. Walsh considered this, pulled out her own phone, and scrolled through what looked like hospital policy documents. After a long moment, she nodded. That works within our framework. I can approve that. Whitmore's jaw worked. This is setting a dangerous precedent. No, igual directive. This is recognizing that sometimes the rules need flexibility to accommodate extraordinary circumstances. And this qualifies. She looked at Vincent. Mr. Chun, would you be willing to accept those terms? Official visitor status with set hours and designated contact authority? Vincent felt the weight of decision pressing down. Acceptance meant commitment, meant staying, meant rebuilding some semblance of structure in a life he'd intentionally dismantled. But it also meant being here when Raymond needed him, being present in a way that was sustainable rather than self-destructive. Yes, ma'am, he said. I accept those terms. Good, Walsh said with finality. I'll have the paperwork processed tonight. Chief Whitmore, please coordinate with Dr. Nguyen on the badge and access protocols. And someone get those news crews off our property. We'll release a brief statement acknowledging Mr. Chen's status and asking for privacy, so we can focus on patient care. Whitmore looked like he wanted to argue further, but whatever he saw in Walsh's expression convinced him otherwise. He gave a curt nod and walked away, his posture rigid with suppressed frustration. After he left, Walsh approached Vincent directly. Mr. Chun, I want you to know something. This hospital has treated thousands of patients, seen countless families come and go. But what you're doing, the loyalty you're showing, that's rare. That's special. And while it may be causing logistical headaches, it's also reminding my staff why they went into medicine in the first place. So thank you. Vincent didn't know what to say to that. Settled for a simple nod. Walsh left to handle the administrative details. Dr. Nguyen returned to her tablet to finalize the visitor protocols. And Jennifer guided Vincent back into Raymond's room, where the untouched food still waited. Eat, she ordered gently. Sleep in your room tonight. Come back in the morning. Start taking care of yourself so you can take care of him. Vincent looked at the man in the bed, at the monitors and tubes and machines keeping him alive, at the still face that showed no sign of awareness or recognition. 3 months of vigil, 3 months of waiting, and now structure. Rules. The beginning of something that looked like permanence. It terrified him more than enemy fire ever had. But he picked up the spoon anyway. Took a bite of soup that had gone lukewarm. Tasted nothing, but forced himself to eat because Jennifer was right. Because staying alive, to keep the promise, mattered more than the comfort of slow self-destruction. And in the bed, deep in the darkness where Raymond Morrison's consciousness drifted, something shifted again. The same presence, the same warmth, the same voice that had been calling him for 91 days. But stronger now, closer, more persistent, as if some part of Raymond's damaged brain recognized that the voice wasn't leaving, that the promise was real, that nomad was still here, still waiting, still refusing to abandon the brother who had once refused to abandon him. Vincent slept in the guest room that night. Not well, not deeply. But he slept. The bed felt strange after 6 years of concrete and cardboard. Too soft, too warm, too safe. He woke 3 times convinced he'd heard Raymond calling for him. Each time he rose and walked the 3 doors down to stand outside the ICU room, watching through the window until the night nurse gently reminded him that Raymond was stable and he should rest. At 0500, he gave up on sleep entirely. Rose and dressed in the clean clothes that had been left for him, made the bed with military precision, then sat on the edge and stared at Elena's photograph in his hands. I'm trying, He whispered to her image. Trying to do this right. But it feels wrong. Feels like I'm giving up on being the person I became after you left. The person who wanted nothing, needed nothing, who could disappear and it wouldn't matter. Her smile in the photograph offered no answers. Just a reminder of what he'd lost. What he'd run from. We'd been too broken to face. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Jennifer Park stood in the hallway holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might be awake, she said. Old soldiers never sleep past 0500, right? Vincent accepted the coffee gratefully. Thank you, ma'am. You're working a double shift? Jennifer shook her head. My shift ended at midnight. But I couldn't sleep either. Kept thinking about Raymond. About you. About what happens next. They walked together to Raymond's room. The day shift was just arriving. Nurses doing handoff reports. Doctors making early rounds. The hospital coming alive with the morning's familiar rhythms. Raymond looked exactly the same. Monitors beeping steadily. Ventilators cycling. No change visible to the naked eye. But Jennifer pulled up his chart on the computer terminal and scrolled through the overnight notes. Look at this, she said, pointing to a section of data. Brain activity monitoring. There's definitely a pattern. Every morning between 05:45 and 06:15, his neural activity increases. Not dramatically, but measurably. The night shift documented it again last night. Vincent leaned closer to study the graphs. Could be coincidental, he said. Could be his natural circadian rhythm. Could be, Jennifer agreed. Or it could be something else. His neurologist is coming by this morning. I flagged it for her attention. Maybe she'll have thoughts. Vincent sat in his usual chair and took Raymond's hand. The routine had become sacred, a ritual that anchored him. Morning coffee, quiet vigil, one-sided conversation with a man who couldn't respond. Morning, Bear, Vincent said softly. Day 92. Still here. Still keeping the promise. They gave me a room last night. Made me official. Catherine Walsh herself approved it. You'd laugh if you could hear me. Remember how we used to joke about going legit? Getting real jobs? Normal lives? Guess I finally did it. Only took me 6 years of living under bridges to accept a hospital guest room. He paused, sipped his coffee. Outside the window, the sun was rising over the city. Another day beginning. Another rotation of hope and routine and waiting. I met a man yesterday, Vincent continued. Colonel Hartfort. He served in 5th Group. Different era, but same traditions. He brought me declassified files from Cambodia. Showed me the after-action reports. The casualty lists. My Silver Star citation. All of it written down like it mattered. Like we mattered. Vincent's voice caught slightly. Reading those names, Bear. Seeing them officially documented. Jackson. Peterson. Rodriguez. Torres. Williams. Chun. All the brothers we lost. It made it real again in a way I'd been avoiding. Made me remember that we didn't just survive. We lost half our team. Half our family. Jennifer had quietly left the room to give him privacy. Vincent barely noticed. When he spoke to Raymond like this, the rest of the world faded. It was just the two of them again. Brothers separated by consciousness, but still connected by bonds forged in blood and fire. You took those bullets from me, Vincent said. Never let me forget it either. Used to joke about it during recovery. Say you'd save the important one. The medic. Because a good medic was worth 10 good soldiers. But that was wrong, Bear. You were worth 100 medics. You were the bravest man I ever knew. The door opened again. Dr. Sarah Chun entered. No relation to Vincent despite the shared surname. She was Raymond's primary neurologist. 40 years old with sharp eyes and the sort of precise manner that came from years of dealing with the fragile mysteries of the human brain. Mr. Chun, she greeted him formally. I'm glad you're here. I wanted to discuss Raymond's status with you. Vincent stood respectfully. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Chun pulled up the brain activity charts on her tablet. I've been reviewing the nursing notes about the morning pattern. The increased neural activity between 05:45 and 06:15. It's consistent. Been happening for approximately 3 weeks now, according to the documentation. Is that significant? Vincent asked. Honestly, I'm not sure, Dr. Chen admitted. Brain activity in coma patients can fluctuate for various reasons. Temperature changes, medication timing, external stimuli. but this pattern is unusually regular, and it correlates with your visiting pattern. You think he knows I'm here? The hope in Vincent's voice was painful to hear. Dr. Chun chose her words carefully. The science on coma awareness is still evolving. We know that some patients can hear and process information even when they can't respond. Others are completely unaware. With Raymond's level of brain damage, the likelihood of awareness is low, but not zero. Vincent sat back, down heavily. What do I do with that information? Keep doing what you're doing, Dr. Chin said. Talk to him. Maintain your presence. If there's any awareness at all, familiar voices and consistent stimulation can sometimes help. She paused. I need to be honest with you, though. 3 months is a long time. The longer a coma lasts, the less likely meaningful recovery becomes. We're approaching a point where I'll need to have conversations with you about long-term care options. Vincent's jaw tightened, like withdrawing support, like discussing realistic expectations and quality of life considerations. Dr. Chun corrected gently. I'm not there yet. Raymond is stable, but it's a conversation we'll need to have eventually. After she left, Vincent sat in silence. The words quality of life hung in the air like an accusation, as if life could be measured in quality rather than simple existence, as if some lives were worth sustaining and others weren't. He knew Dr. Chun was being responsible, preparing him for the possibility that Raymond might never wake, that the machines might be the only thing keeping his body functioning, that eventually mercy might mean letting go. But Vincent wasn't ready for mercy. He was ready for miracles, for the impossible, for the thing that doctors said couldn't happen, but that soldiers knew sometimes did anyway. The morning passed in quiet routine. Nurses came to turn Raymond's body to prevent bed sores, to suction his airway, to check his catheter and adjust his medications. Each procedure performed with professional efficiency while Vincent watched and waited. Around noon, Tran arrived. He moved slower than yesterday, leaning more heavily on his cane, but his eyes were bright with determination. He carried a small bundle wrapped in silk. I brought something, Tran said, settling into the second chair. For Raymond, for my culture, we believe the spirit can hear even when the body cannot. So we bring offerings, prayers. We hold vigil, just as you do. He unwrapped the silk to reveal a small jade Buddha, no larger than a fist, but intricately carved. The stone was a deep green that seemed to glow in the hospital light. This belonged to my father, Tran explained. He carried it for Vietnam, through the war, through our escape, through everything. When he died, he gave it to me, said it protected our family, kept us safe. I want Raymond to have it, for protection, for luck, for whatever grace might still be available. Vincent accepted the Buddha with trembling hands. Mr. Tran, I can't accept this. It's too valuable, too meaningful, which is exactly why it belongs here, Tran insisted. You saved my life so I could build a family. Now I offer what my family holds sacred to help save your brother. It is fitting. It is right. He placed the Buddha on Raymond's bedside table next to the photograph. The jade seemed to catch the light and hold it, creating a small pool of green luminescence in the sterile white room. The two old men sat together then, Vincent and Tran, connected by a promise kept 52 years ago, by the bonds of survival and sacrifice, by the understanding that some debts transcended culture or language or the ordinary boundaries that separated people. My daughter tells me you lived on the streets for 6 years, Tran said after a long silence. That you left your home after your wife died. Vincent nodded. Yes, sir. Why? Tran's question was gentle but direct. Why would a man who saved so many lives throw away his own? Vincent was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I couldn't save her. Because all the training and skill and experience meant nothing when it mattered most. Because watching her die broke something in me that I didn't know how to fix. So you ran, Tran said. Not with judgment, just acknowledgement. I ran, Vincent confirmed. Convinced myself I didn't deserve comfort, didn't deserve help, didn't deserve anything except the cold concrete and the hunger and the invisibility. And now, Tran pressed. Now that people know who you are, now that help is being offered, Now I'm terrified, Vincent admitted, because accepting help means admitting I want to live, want to heal, want something beyond just keeping this one promise. And I don't know if I'm ready for that. Tran reached over and gripped Vincent's shoulder. The touch was firm, grounding. When I was carried out of my village, Tran said I did not want to leave. My home was there, my ancestors' graves, everything I knew. But you told me something. Do you remember? Vincent shook his head. You said surviving isn't betraying the dead. It's honoring them. Living fully is how we prove their sacrifice meant something. Tran's eyes were bright with unshed tears. So I tell you now what you told me then. Elena would not want you to destroy yourself. She would want you to live, to heal, to find purpose again. Keeping Raymond alive is part of that purpose. But it cannot be the only part. The words hit Vincent like a physical blow, because they were his own words, spoken a lifetime ago to a terrified refugee who thought survival meant dishonoring the dead he'd left behind. And hearing them reflected back, hearing his own wisdom applied to his own wounds, broke something loose in his chest. I don't know how, Vincent said. His voice cracked. I don't know how to be anything except what I became. You start small, Tran said. You accept the room, the food, the help that's offered. You let yourself be seen. And slowly, step by step, you rebuild. Not the life you had. That's gone. But a new life. One that honors what was and embraces what could be. Vincent looked at Raymond. At the jade Buddha glowing on the bedside table. At the monitors tracking a life suspended between existence and ending. And he made a decision. Not a big one. Not dramatic. Just small. But real. Okay, he said quietly. I'll try. Day 95 arrived with unexpected developments. Vincent woke at 0500 as always, but this time when he walked to Raymond's room, he found a crowd gathering in the hallway. Not hospital staff. Veterans. Dozens of them. Some in uniform. Others in civilian clothes with military bearing that couldn't be hidden. They stood in quiet clusters, speaking in low voices, waiting. Marcus Webb was organizing them, creating a rotation system, explaining visiting protocols. When he saw Vincent, he waved him over. Sir, Marcus said, these folks have been arriving since 0400. Word spread through the veteran networks that today is significant. 3 months exactly since Raymond's stroke. They wanted to be here, to show support. Vincent looked at the assembled faces. Young and old. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. Different eras, different wars, but united by the common thread of service and the story of a promise being kept. I don't understand, Vincent said quietly. Why would they come? An older man stepped forward. He wore a Vietnam veteran cap and carried himself with the slight stoop of someone whose back had been broken and badly healed. Because stories like yours remind us why we served, he said. Because loyalty like yours is rare. Because we need to remember that promises matter. Another veteran, younger, maybe 40, moved closer. I did 3 tours in Afghanistan, he said. Lost my team leader to an IED in Kandahar. I visit his grave every week. Have for 8 years. When I saw your story, when I heard about you waiting for Raymond, it made me feel less crazy, less alone. So I drove 6 hours to be here, to tell you that what you're doing matters. Vincent felt the weight of their expectations pressing down. He wasn't a symbol, wasn't a hero, just a broken man keeping a promise because he didn't know what else to do. But their faces held something he hadn't seen in 6 years. Recognition, not of who he'd been, but of who he still was. Thank you, Vincent managed. All of you. Raymond would be honored. Jennifer Park appeared at his elbow. Mr. Chun, Dr. Chun wants to see you. Something's changed with Raymond's readings overnight. Vincent's heart seized. Change how? I don't know, Jennifer admitted, but she asked you to come immediately. Vincent moved through the crowd of veterans who parted respectfully, entered Raymond's room to find Dr. Chun studying the monitors with intense focus. The neurologist's expression was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. What happened? Vincent asked. Dr. Chun gestured to the brain activity charts on her screen. Look at this. Starting at 0547 this morning, Raymond's neural activity spiked. Not the usual small increase we've been documenting. A significant spike. It lasted for approximately 8 minutes, then returned to baseline. Vincent leaned closer to study the graphs. What does it mean? I'm not certain, Dr. Chun said carefully. It could mean his brain is attempting to re-establish normal patterns. It could be a seizure. It could be random electrical activity that doesn't signify anything meaningful. She paused, but the timing is interesting. 0547, right when you usually arrive. Vincent looked at Raymond's still face. Bear, he said softly, if you can hear me, if you're in there trying to come back, I need you to keep fighting. I need you to know I'm here, that I'm not leaving. Dr. Chun checked her watch. It's 0552 now. I'd like to try something. An experiment. With your permission. Anything, Vincent said. Talk to him, the way you normally would. Tell him a story from Cambodia. Something specific. Something only Raymond would know. Let's see if we get another spike. Vincent sat and took Raymond's hand. The now familiar weight of those unresponsive fingers. He closed his eyes and let memory take him back. Back to the jungle. To the heat and fear and the moments when death felt close enough to touch. Bear, Vincent began. Remember the night before the operation? We were in the briefing tent, and you were nervous. Not about the mission. About the letter you'd written. You'd sealed it. Addressed it to me. Told me if you didn't make it, I had to make sure it got delivered. Vincent's voice steadied as the memory solidified. I told you that was bad luck. That talking about dying meant you were already half gone. But you insisted. Said some things needed to be said before it was too late. And you made me promise that if you died, I'd read that letter. Understand what it said. Honor what it asked. Dr. Chun was watching the monitors intently. Her eyes widened slightly. The operation went bad. Vincent continued. You know that. You were there. Half our team died in the first 10 minutes. And when you took those bullets protecting me, when I thought I was going to lose you too, all I could think about was that letter. What it said. What you'd asked of me that I didn't even know yet. On the monitor, Raymond's brain activity began to climb. Not dramatically, but measurably. The same pattern as earlier, but sustained this time. Steady. You survived, Vincent said. His voice was thick with emotion now. Made it through surgery. Recovered enough to be shipped stateside. And when you were stable, when I knew you were going to make it, I gave you back that letter. Unopened. Told you that you could deliver your own messages now. That I wasn't going to be your posthumous mailman. Vincent opened his eyes. Looked at the monitors showing Raymond's increased activity. Do you remember what you said to me, Bear? You said that letter was the most important thing you'd ever written. That it said everything you needed to say about brotherhood and sacrifice and what it meant to serve with men you die for. And then you burned it. Right there in the hospital. Said you didn't need it anymore because I'd kept you alive to say those things to my face. The brain activity spiked higher. Dr. Chen's hand moved to her mouth. That's when you told me I'd earned the name Nomad, Vincent continued. Because I went where I was needed. Because I never stayed in one place. Because I moved between teams bringing people back from the edge. And you made me promise then, made me swear on everything we'd been through, that I would never leave anyone behind. That I would always be the one who showed up, who stayed, who refused to quit. Tears were streaming down Vincent's face now. And I kept that promise, Bear. For 52 years, I kept it. Showed up for brothers who needed a medic. Stayed with soldiers who were dying so they wouldn't be alone. Refused to quit no matter how bad it got. Until Elena died. Until I broke. Until I became the one who needed saving and I didn't know how to ask for help. The monitors continued their elevated pattern. Steady. Sustained. As if somewhere in the darkness Raymond was listening. Hearing. Understanding. But I'm here now, Vincent said. Day 95. Still keeping the promise. Still showing up. Still refusing to leave you behind. Because that's what Nomad does. That's who you helped me become. And I'm not giving up on you. Not today. Not ever. Dr. Chun was making notes rapidly on her tablet. Mr. Chun, she said quietly. I think he hears you. I think some part of him is aware. This level of sustained response to specific auditory stimulus, it's not random. It's purposeful. Will he wake up? Vincent asked. The question he'd been afraid to voice for 3 months. I don't know, Dr. Chun admitted. Brain injuries are unpredictable. But this is more response than we've seen in the entire time he's been here. It's significant. It's hope. The door opened. Tran entered with Dr. Nguyen beside him. They'd been standing in the hallway with the other veterans, listening through the open door. Tran's face was wet with tears. Dr. Nguyen held her father's arm, her own expression filled with wonder. "He is fighting," Tran said. "Your brother. He fights to come back to you." Vincent couldn't speak, could only nod. The weight of 3 months of vigil, of 6 years of self-imposed exile, of 52 years of carrying the promise, all of it pressed down until he felt like he might shatter under the pressure. Jennifer appeared with more veterans behind her. They'd heard somehow, news traveling through the assembled crowd, that something was happening in room 404. That Raymond Morrison, the comatose war hero, was showing signs of awareness. One of the older veterans, a man with a chest full of medals on his jacket, stepped forward. "Permission to render honors, sir?" he asked Vincent. Vincent didn't understand at first. Then the veteran came to attention, raised his hand in a slow, deliberate salute. Not to Vincent, to Raymond, to the man in the bed who had taken bullets protecting his brother, who had earned his own kind of legend. One by one, the other veterans in the hallway came to attention. 30 men and women standing in formation outside an ICU room, rendering honors to a soldier who couldn't see them, who might never see them, but who deserved recognition anyway. Vincent stood, came to his own attention, returned the salute on Raymond's behalf. The gesture felt sacred, ancient, a ritual older than any of them that connected soldiers across time and circumstance and the arbitrary boundaries of wars and eras. Dr. Chun checked the monitors again. The sustained activity was beginning to decrease, returning toward baseline. But for those 8 minutes, for that brief window, Raymond Morrison's damaged brain had responded to Vincent's voice with unmistakable purpose. "This changes things," Dr. Chun said. "I'm not ready to discuss withdrawing support anymore. Not when he's showing this kind of response. We continue aggressive treatment. Continue trying to stimulate awareness. Continue hoping for recovery that the textbooks say is impossible, but that we're seeing evidence might not be." Vincent sat back down heavily, took Raymond's hand again. The veterans began to disperse, returning to the hallway, giving the room space but maintaining their presence. Their vigil joining Vincent's. Their support creating a web of care around 2 old soldiers who had survived hell together and who were trying to survive this new hell apart. "Bear," Vincent whispered. "I don't know if you can still hear me. Don't know if that spike was you fighting to come back or just your brain misfiring. But I'm going to believe it was you. Going to believe you're in there. Going to keep talking and hoping and waiting because that's what I promised." He pulled out his worn field medical guide, the one Raymond had given him 50 years ago. The pages were soft with age and handling, stained with blood and sweat and the residue of 1,000 desperate situations. "Remember this?" Vincent asked, holding it up even though Raymond couldn't see. "You gave me this before my first mission. Said a good medic needed good information. That knowledge saved lives as surely as skill did. I've carried it ever since. Through every operation, every deployment, every year on the streets. It's falling apart now, but it still has your handwriting inside the cover." He opened to the first page where Raymond had written in bold script, "For Nomad. May you never need this, but always have it. Your brother, Bear." "That's what you called yourself," Vincent said softly. "My brother. Not just my teammate. Not just my friend. My brother. And brothers don't give up on each other. Brothers don't walk away. Brothers keep promises even when it costs everything." The morning sun streamed through the window. Day 95 becoming day 96. The waiting continuing. But something had shifted. Some fundamental change in the air. In the possibility. In the hope that maybe, just maybe, the promise would not just be kept but fulfilled. And Vincent sat holding his brother's hand, surrounded by veterans who understood, by medical staff who believed, by the ghost of Elena watching from wherever the dead went. All of them waiting together for the moment when Raymond Morrison might open his eyes and see that Nomad had kept his word. Day 97 brought the neurologist team. Not just Dr. Chun, but 3 other specialists called in to review Raymond's case. They crowded around his bed with tablets and charts, discussing neural patterns and brain plasticity and the mysterious mechanisms of consciousness that science still couldn't fully explain. Vincent sat in the corner, displaced but patient. This was their domain, their expertise. He was just the voice that had somehow broken through when medical science said it shouldn't be possible. Dr. Chun addressed the group. Based on the sustained response we documented yesterday, I believe we're seeing purposeful neural activity. Not random firing, not seizure activity, actual cognitive processing in response to specific auditory stimulus. One of the other doctors, an older man with steel-gray hair, looked skeptical. You're suggesting a patient with this level of diffuse brain damage is capable of processing complex verbal information? That contradicts everything we know about stroke recovery at this stage. I'm suggesting we document what we're observing rather than dismiss it because it doesn't fit our expectations, Dr. Chun replied firmly. The spike occurred during a specific story, a memory that only the patient and Mr. Chun shared. The timing wasn't coincidental. The gray-haired doctor turned to Vincent. Mr. Chun, would you be willing to repeat the exercise? Tell another specific story while we monitor his brain activity in real time? Vincent nodded. Yes, sir. They set up additional monitoring equipment, connected more electrodes to Raymond's scalp, adjusted sensors and calibrated machines. The room filled with the hum of medical technology, all focused on one question. Was anyone home inside the damaged brain of Raymond Morrison? When they were ready, Dr. Chun gave Vincent a nod. Whenever you're comfortable. Vincent took Raymond's hand, felt the familiar weight of those fingers that had once gripped a rifle with deadly precision, that had pulled him from danger more times than he could count, that had written the letter he'd never read because Raymond had survived to deliver the message himself. Bear, Vincent began. I'm going to tell you about the day we met. I know you can't respond. Don't know if you can even hear me. But I'm going to believe you can. Going to trust that somewhere in there, you're listening. The monitors showed Raymond's baseline activity. Steady. Minimal. The doctors watched with clinical detachment, waiting for evidence. For brag, Vincent continued. Summer of 1968. I just finished medic training. Was being assigned to 5th Group. Showed up at the unit scared out of my mind because I was 23 years old and everyone around me looked like they'd been born knowing how to kill people. Vincent's voice took on the rhythm of memory, of story, of the 1,000 times he'd recalled this moment in the decades since. You were the biggest man I'd ever seen, Vincent said. 6'4" and built like you could bend steel with your bare hands. You were the team's point man, the one who went first into every bad situation. And you looked at this skinny kid with a medical bag and you laughed. Actually laughed. On the monitor, Raymond's brain activity ticked upward. Subtle, but present. The doctors leaned closer. You said, so you're the one who's supposed to keep us alive? The kid who looks like a strong wind could blow him over? And I was terrified you were going to reject me. Tell the commander you didn't want some inexperienced medic on your team. But then you did something I never expected. Vincent's grip tightened on Raymond's hand. You extended your hand, shook mine, so hard I thought you'd break my fingers. And you said, welcome to the team, document. I'm Bear. You keep us breathing, I'll keep you from getting shot. Deal. The brain activity climbed higher. Steady. Purposeful. Exactly like the pattern from yesterday. And that was it, Vincent said. That was the moment we became brothers. Not in blood, but in promise. You'd keep me safe. I'd keep you alive. And for 3 years we did exactly that. Through operations that officially never happened. Through firefights that should have killed us. Through Cambodia and the mission that took half our team but couldn't break us. The gray-haired doctor was making rapid notes. His skepticism visibly crumbling as the data contradicted his expectations. You remember what you told me that last day in Vietnam? Vincent asked, right before we shipped out separately? You said that we'd cheated death together so many times that we were probably linked for life. That no matter where we ended up, no matter how many years passed, we'd always be brothers. Always have each other's backs. Vincent's voice broke slightly. And you were right, Bear. 52 years later, and I'm still here. Still keeping my end of the deal. Still refusing to let you go. Because that's what brothers do. They show up. They stay. They keep promises even when it costs everything. The brain activity peaked. Higher than yesterday. Higher than any reading they documented since Raymond's admission. The monitors registered the spike with clear, unmistakable data that couldn't be dismissed as random or coincidental. Dr. Chin's eyes were bright. That's purposeful response. That's awareness. The gray-haired doctor nodded slowly. I stand corrected. This patient is exhibiting cognitive function despite the severity of his brain damage. It's extraordinary. What does this mean? Vincent asked. Will he wake up? Dr. Chin chose her words carefully. It means there's more consciousness present than we thought. It means continued aggressive treatment is justified. It means hope is appropriate. But I can't promise waking. Can't promise recovery. Brain injuries don't follow predictable paths. But there's a chance, Vincent pressed. A real chance. Yes, Dr. Chin confirmed. There's a real chance. The other doctors began discussing treatment modifications. Increased physical therapy to prevent muscle atrophy. Modified medication protocols to support neural recovery. Plans for advanced imaging to map exactly what parts of Raymond's brain were still functioning. Vincent barely heard them. His focus was entirely on the man in the bed, on the fingers he held that had given the slightest twitch during the story. So small he might have imagined it. But he didn't think he had. Bear, he whispered, if you're in there fighting to come back, I need you to keep fighting. Need you to know that there are dozens of veterans outside this room right now. Brothers from different wars and different eras. All here because your story inspired them. Because loyalty, like ours, reminds them why service matters. Jennifer Park appeared in the doorway. Mr. Chun, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Vincent reluctantly released Raymond's hand. Stepped into the hallway to find a woman in her 60s waiting. She had kind eyes and the sort of weathered beauty that spoke of a life fully lived. In her hands, she clutched a photograph. Mr. Chun? She asked. Vincent Chun? Nomad? Yes, ma'am, Vincent confirmed. The woman's eyes filled with tears. My father was Staff Sergeant Michael Torres. He died in Cambodia. March 5th, 1971. Operation Atlas Shrug. Vincent's breath caught. Torres, one of the 6 they'd lost. One of the names tattooed on his arm. One of the brothers who hadn't come home. You tried to save him, the woman continued. My mother told me. She said a medic named Nomad worked on him for 40 minutes. Refused to give up even when it was clear he was gone. Stayed with him so he wouldn't die alone. Vincent remembered. Remembered Torres taking shrapnel to the abdomen. Remembered the desperate surgery attempt while mortars fell. Remember the moment when Torres's eyes had gone fixed and empty and all the skill in the world couldn't bring him back. I'm sorry, Vincent said, his voice rough with old grief. I tried. I did everything I knew, but it wasn't enough. The woman stepped forward and took his hand. You've gave my father dignity in his final moments. You didn't let him die alone in the jungle like an animal. You treated him like he mattered, like his life meant something. And my mother never forgot that. Never stopped being grateful that someone cared enough to try. She pressed the photograph into his hand. This is my father, 2 months before he deployed. He's holding me. I was 6 months old. I don't remember him. But I grew up knowing he was a hero. Knowing he served with men who valued his life. Men like you. The photograph showed a young soldier in dress uniform holding an infant. His smile was wide and proud, full of hope for a future he'd never see. He would have been 74 this year, the woman said. Would have had grandchildren, a full life. But he died at 23 doing his duty. And I needed to find you. Needed to tell you that what you did mattered. That try to save him, even when it was impossible, that meant everything to my family. Vincent couldn't speak. Could only hold the photograph and remember the weight of Torres's body. The warmth fading. The moment when life became death and all the training in the world couldn't reverse it. Other people were emerging from the waiting area now. More families. Sons and daughters of the men who had died in Cambodia. Each one carrying photographs. Each one with stories of fathers they barely remembered or never knew. Each one seeking connection to the medic who had tried to save lives that couldn't be saved. This is Jackson's daughter, someone said, introducing a woman in her 50s. This is Rodriguez's son. This is Peterson's widow. They surrounded Vincent with their memories and photographs and gratitude, with their grief still fresh after 52 years, with their need to know that their loved ones hadn't died alone, hadn't been forgotten, had mattered to someone beyond their immediate families. And Vincent stood in the center of this unexpected gathering, holding photographs of young men frozen in time, men whose names he carried on his skin, whose deaths he'd witnessed, whose final moments he'd tried to make bearable. "You honored our fathers," Jackson's daughter said. "Now I want to honor you." And Raymond, "We heard about his response to your stories. Heard he might be fighting to come back. We're here to support that fight, to keep vigil with you." The hallway had become a memorial, a sacred space where the living and the dead mingled, where promises kept decades ago were finally being recognized, where sacrifice was being acknowledged by the generation who had inherited the cost. Vincent looked at all those faces, all those children of the fallen, and he understood something he'd been too broken to see before. His promise to Raymond wasn't just about one man. It was about all of them, about proving that brotherhood survived death, that loyalty outlasted loss, that some bonds were eternal. "Come with me," he said quietly. "All of you. Come meet Raymond. Come see the man who saved my life so I could try to save your father's. Come understand what we were to each other, what we still are." And together, this unexpected congregation of the grateful and the grieving, they moved toward room 404 where Raymond Morrison lay fighting his way back from darkness, where monitors showed brain activity that shouldn't exist but did, where hope lived despite all medical logic, where a promise 52 years old was finally beginning to bear fruit. Day in 1909 arrived with a room full of witnesses. The families of the fallen had maintained their vigil alongside Vincent, taking shifts, bringing coffee and food, creating a community of shared loss and stubborn hope in the sterile hallway of the ICU. Jennifer Park had stopped trying to enforce strict visiting protocols. How could you turn away the daughter of a man who died saving others? How could you deny entry to the son who never met his father because a jungle in Cambodia had claimed him first? The rules bent, broke, reformed around the reality of what was happening in room 404. Vincent sat in his usual chair, holding Raymond's hand. But this morning felt different. The air had a quality of anticipation, of potential, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Dr. Chen arrived with her team at 0545, 15 minutes before Vincent's usual arrival time. They wanted to establish baseline readings before the morning spike they'd documented for the past 3 days. Wanted to prove beyond doubt that Raymond's response was tied specifically to Vincent's presence and voice. The families gathered in the hallway watched through the window. Torres's daughter stood beside Tran. Rodriguez's son compared notes with Peterson's widow. Jackson's daughter held the jade Buddha that Tran had brought, turning it over in her hands like a talisman. At 0547, Vincent began to speak, his voice quiet but steady, carrying the weight of 99 days of vigil, of 52 years of brotherhood, of a lifetime of promises kept and losses endured. "Bear," Vincent said, "today is day 99. 3 days short of what the doctor said would be the point where hope became delusion. 3 days from when they'd start suggesting we consider letting you go. But I'm not ready for that conversation. And I don't think you are either." The monitors showed the now familiar upward climb. Brain activity increasing. Purposeful. Responsive. Undeniable. "I want to tell you about the 6 we lost," Vincent continued. "About the brothers who didn't make it home. Because I've been carrying them alone for too long. Carrying the guilt and the grief and the weight of wondering if I could have done more. Done better. Save them." His voice steadied as he named them. Jackson. Torres. Rodriguez. Peterson. Williams. Chun. No relation to me despite the shared name. Each one a good man. Each one someone's son or husband or father. Each one gone before their time. Vincent looked at the families watching through the window. "Their children are here, Bear. Did you know that? Torres's daughter. Rodriguez's son. All of them gathered because they heard about us. About a promise being kept. About brotherhood that survived death. They came to honor you. To honor what we were to each other." The brain activity continued climbing, higher than any previous reading. The doctors exchanged glances, made notes, adjusted sensors to capture every nuance of what was happening. They told me you tried to save their fathers, Vincent said. Told me what it meant to them that someone cared, that someone fought, that someone refused to let their loved ones die alone in the dark. And I realized something, Bear. We saved each other that day. You took bullets for me. I kept you breathing. But we also saved those families. Gave them the knowledge that their fathers died among brothers. Died valued. Died mourned. Vincent's hand tightened on Raymond's fingers. And then I felt it. Unmistakable this time. A squeeze. Weak. Barely there. But real. Raymond's fingers had moved. Had responded. Had gripped back. Dr. Chun, Vincent said urgently. His hand. He squeezed my hand. The doctors moved closer. Checked the monitors. The brain activity was spiking higher still, approaching levels that suggested not just awareness, but active cognitive processing, the kind of neural function that preceded voluntary movement. Mr. Morrison, Dr. Chun said clearly, speaking directly to Raymond. If you can hear us, if you're trying to communicate, squeeze Mr. Chin's hand again. The room went silent. Everyone watching, waiting, the monitors beeping, the ventilator cycling, time stretching into something thick and heavy with possibility. And then it happened. Raymond's fingers moved, squeezed, held, released. A purposeful action that couldn't be explained away as reflex or coincidence. The gray-haired neurologist who had been skeptical 3 days ago stepped forward. That's voluntary motor response. That's consciousness. He looked at Dr. Chun with something approaching awe. You were right. He's in there. He's aware. Bear, Vincent said, his voice breaking. I'm here, brother. I've been here every day. 99 days. And I'm not leaving. You fight. You come back. You hear me? Another squeeze. Stronger this time. Unmistakable. Jennifer Park had tears streaming down her face. The families in the hallway were embracing. Some crying. Some laughing. The impossible was happening. The miracle they'd hoped for but barely believed in was occurring in real time. Dr. Chun made a decision. We're going to try to wean him off sedation. See if we can bring him closer to consciousness. It's risky. He might not tolerate it. But given this level of response, I think we have to try. She began adjusting medication levels, reducing the drugs that kept Raymond in medically induced unconsciousness. The process would take hours, would require careful monitoring. But if it worked, if Raymond could tolerate wakefulness, they might actually see his eyes open. Vincent refused to leave, refused to eat, refused everything except the vigil he'd maintained for 99 days. His hand stayed locked with Raymond's. His voice kept talking, telling stories, sharing memories, reminding Raymond of who he was, who they'd been together, what they meant to each other. The hours passed slowly. The families rotated through in small groups, each one spending time beside Raymond's bed, telling him about the fathers and husbands they'd lost, thanking him for being the kind of soldier who valued his brothers, who took bullets to protect his medic, who lived the code that said no one gets left behind. Tran brought his entire family, his 4 children, his 11 grandchildren, 3 generations of life that existed because Vincent had kept a promise in 1971. They filed past Raymond's bed like a receiving line of evidence. Proof that promises kept rippled forward through time. That one act of courage could echo across decades. Colonel Hartford arrived carrying a flag. The American flag that had flown over Fort Bragg the day the news came about Operation Atlas Shrugged. The day the Army learned it had lost 6 soldiers in an operation that officially didn't exist. He draped it carefully over the foot of Raymond's bed. This belongs here, Hartford said, with the men who served, who sacrificed, who proved that brotherhood is stronger than fear. By late afternoon, Raymond's sedation levels had been reduced to minimal. His body was breathing more on its own, the ventilator support decreasing. Dr. Chun watched the monitors with hawk-like intensity, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. And then, at 16:47, 99 days and 8 hours after Raymond Morrison had been admitted to City General Hospital with a massive stroke, something changed. His eyelids fluttered, just slightly, just enough to notice. Everyone in the room froze. Vincent leaned closer, his hand gripping Raymond's with desperate hope. "Bear," Vincent whispered. "Can you hear me? Can you open your eyes?" Another flutter, stronger this time. The muscles fighting against 3 months of disuse, against brain damage that should have made this impossible, against all the medical odds and statistics that said he would never wake. The eyelids cracked open, just a millimeter, just enough for light to penetrate, for the world to seep back in after 99 days of darkness. Dr. Chun moved to the side of the bed. "Mr. Morrison, can you see us? Can you focus?" Raymond's eyes, clouded and unfocused at first, moved slowly, searching, looking for something, someone. His gaze drifted across the monitors, the ceiling, the concerned faces of the medical team. And then they found Vincent. Recognition didn't come immediately. His brain was still damaged, still struggling to make connections. But something in those eyes changed when they landed on Vincent's face. Some spark of knowing that transcended the injury. Raymond's mouth moved. The ventilator tube prevented speech, but the shape was clear. A single syllable forming on cracked lips that hadn't spoken in 3 months. Nomad. Vincent's tears came then. Unstoppable. The grief and hope and relief of 99 days crashing over him in a wave that threatened to pull him under. He pressed his forehead against Raymond's hand, felt the fingers squeeze back with more strength than before. "I'm here," Vincent sobbed. "I'm here, brother. I kept the promise. I didn't leave you. I never left you." Through the window, the families watched the reunion, watched the promise fulfilled, watched brotherhood prove stronger than brain damage and medical impossibility and all the forces that should have kept these two old soldiers apart. Torres's daughter raised her phone and filmed. Rodriguez's son called someone with shaking hands. Peterson's widow simply stood and cried, remembering her own husband who had died before Vincent could save him, but grateful that this one had been saved, that this promise had been kept. Dr. Chun was already planning the next steps, removing the ventilator tube, beginning speech therapy, mapping the extent of Raymond's cognitive recovery. But for this moment, she let the reunion happen without medical interference. Some things were sacred. Some moments belonged to the human heart rather than clinical protocols. Raymond's eyes stayed locked on Vincent, his grip maintained. And though he couldn't speak, though the damage to his brain meant his recovery would be long and uncertain, one thing was absolutely clear. He knew who Vincent was, knew what had been done for him, knew that Nomad had kept his word. And in that knowing, in that recognition, the promise made 52 years ago in blood and fire and desperation finally found its completion. Not in the jungle where it had been spoken, not in the years that had followed, but here, in a hospital room, on day 99, when Raymond Morrison opened his eyes and saw that his brother had never left. The ventilator tube came out on day 101. Raymond's breathing was weak, but functional. His lungs working on their own after 3 months of mechanical assistance. The medical team hovered close, ready to intervene if needed, but Raymond held steady. Fighting, surviving, just like he'd done in Cambodia when 3 bullets should have killed him. His first spoken words came 2 hours after extubation. Just whispers, rough and broken from disuse, but words nonetheless. Nomad. His voice was barely audible. "Still here." Vincent gripped his hand tighter. "Still here, brother. Both of us." Raymond's eyes moved slowly around the room, taking in the monitors, the medical equipment, the jade Buddha on the bedside table catching afternoon light. His brain was processing, but slowly. Connections forming through damaged pathways. Memories surfacing like objects rising from deep water. "How long?" Raymond managed. 99 days, Vincent said. 3 months. You had a massive stroke. The doctor said you might never wake up. But I didn't listen. A ghost of a smile touched Raymond's lips. Never did. Listen. Stubborn. Learn from the best, Vincent replied. Dr. Chun entered for her afternoon assessment. She'd barely slept since Raymond's awakening. Too excited by the medical implications. Too invested in the outcome. She examined Raymond's responses. Checked pupil reactions. Asked him to follow simple commands. Squeeze her hand. Blink twice. Move his toes. Raymond's responses were slow but present. His right side was weaker than his left. The stroke had done damage that would require months of rehabilitation. But he was conscious, aware, present in a way the medical textbooks said should have been impossible. Mr. Morrison, Dr. Chun said gently, "Do you understand where you are? What happened to you?" Raymond's eyes found Vincent again, as if checking to make sure he was real, not a hallucination conjured by damaged brain. "Hospital," Raymond said. "Stroke." And then Nomad stayed. He did, Dr. Chin confirmed. For 99 days. Slept outside on concrete for 3 months until we finally convinced him to accept a room. Talk to you every morning. The research team believes your brain was responding to his voice even while you were unconscious. Raymond's hand squeezed Vincent's with surprising strength. Always. Responds. To him, Jennifer Park brought the families who had been waiting. Torres's daughter entered first. She carried the photograph of her father, the young soldier holding an infant. She approached Raymond's bed with the reverence of someone entering sacred space. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "my name is Maria Torres. My father was Staff Sergeant Michael Torres. He died in Cambodia on March 5, 1971. He served with you and Mr. Chun." Raymond's eyes studied the photograph. Memory was clearly difficult. His brain searching through damaged pathways for information that might not be accessible. But then something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Grief. The weight of loss that never fully healed. "Torres," Raymond whispered. "Good man. Good soldier. You tried to save him," Maria continued. "Both of you. My mother told me. She said you and Nomad fought to keep him alive. But he didn't die alone because you were there." Raymond's eyes filled with tears. He looked at Vincent. "We lost. Too many." 6, Vincent confirmed quietly. "Out of 12. We brought 6 home and left 6 behind." Rodriguez's son stepped forward next. Then Peterson's widow. Then Jackson's daughter. Each one sharing their connection to the men who had died. Each one thanking Raymond for being the kind of soldier who valued his brothers, who had taken bullets to protect his medic so that medic could try to save others. Raymond listened to each story, his face showing the effort of processing, the struggle to reconcile memory with present reality. But he held Vincent's hand through all of it, anchoring himself to the one constant that had remained through 99 days of darkness. When the families had finished, Tran entered. He moved slowly but with dignity, his cane tapping on the floor. When Raymond saw him, confusion crossed his face. Tran bowed deeply. "Mr. Morrison, I am Tran Dukmin. Your brother Vincent saved my life in Cambodia. Carried me 6 kilometers with a broken leg while your team provided covering fire. I exist because of your sacrifice. My children exist. My grandchildren. All of us owe our lives to what you and Vincent did." Raymond looked at Vincent. "You kept the promise." "Every promise," Vincent confirmed. "To you, to them, to all the brothers who needed someone to show up." Colonel Hartford entered carrying a folder. Official documents. The kind sealed with military precision. He approached Raymond's bed and came to attention. "Staff Sergeant Morrison," Hartford said formally. "I'm Colonel James Hartford, 5th Special Forces Group. I've been authorized by the Department of the Army to deliver something long overdue." He opened the folder and removed a metal case. Inside was a silver star. The citation read aloud filled the room with the official record of what Raymond had done. How he'd sacrificed his body to protect his medic. How he continued fighting despite multiple wounds. How his actions had allowed 4 other soldiers to survive an ambush that should have killed them all. "This was approved 52 years ago," Hartford said, "but you were in recovery stateside and couldn't attend the ceremony. It's been waiting for you ever since. With your permission, I'd like to present it now." Raymond's eyes moved to Vincent. "Couldn't. Without him." Hartford smiled. "Mr. Chun received his silver star for the same action. You protected him so he could save others. He saved you so you could come home. The citations are mirror images. 2 men doing what brothers do, keeping each other alive." He pinned the medal to Raymond's hospital gown, the silver star catching the light. A recognition 52 years delayed, but no less meaningful for the wait. The room, filled with witnesses, came to attention. Veterans and families, medical staff and administrators. Even Whitmore stood in the doorway at attention. His earlier antagonism transformed into something approaching reverence. Hartford saluted. Raymond tried to lift his weak right arm to return it. Vincent helped him, supporting the arm, completing the gesture. Two old soldiers acknowledging honor, acknowledging sacrifice, acknowledging the cost of promises kept. After Hartford stepped back, Raymond's strength began to fade. Dr. Chin noticed immediately. "Enough for today," she said gently. "He needs rest. This level of stimulus, after 3 months unconscious, is exhausting for his brain." The room emptied slowly, each person touching Raymond's bed or squeezing his arm in farewell. Each one changed by witnessing what loyalty looked like, what brotherhood meant, what promises could accomplish when kept with absolute commitment. Vincent started to rise, but Raymond's grip tightened. "Stay," Raymond whispered. "Please." "I'm not going anywhere," Vincent assured him. "I'll be in my room 3 doors down, but I'll be here first thing tomorrow morning." Raymond's eyes held his. 99 days. You stayed. 99 days. "I made a promise," Vincent said simply. "In Cambodia. You made me swear I'd never leave anyone behind. So I didn't leave you behind." "Could have," Raymond said. "Should have. I'm just." Old broken soldier. Vincent's hand came up to grip Raymond's shoulder. "You're my brother. And brothers don't calculate worth. Don't weigh cost. They just show up. They stay. They refuse to quit." Raymond's eyes closed, exhaustion claiming him. But his hand stayed locked with Vincent's. "Thank you," he whispered, "for keeping the promise." "Always," Vincent replied. "That's what Nomad does." Jennifer dimmed the lights as Vincent finally left the room. In the hallway, the families waited. They'd witnessed something profound, something that transcended their own losses and grief. They'd seen loyalty proven real, seen brotherhood survive impossible odds, seen 2 old soldiers complete a promise made in blood 52 years ago. Torres's daughter approached Vincent. "Mr. Chun, what you did, maintaining that vigil, it gave all of us hope. Hope that our fathers' deaths mattered, that the men they served with valued them, that someone remembered." Vincent accepted her embrace, accepted the gratitude of Rodriguez's son and Peterson's widow and Jackson's daughter, accepted the weight of being a symbol when he'd only ever wanted to be a brother keeping a promise. That night, Vincent slept in his guest room. Really slept. Deeply. For the first time in 6 years. The photograph of Elena on his nightstand caught moonlight. He touched her face gently. "I kept the promise," he told her. "Brought Raymond back. Now I need to figure out how to keep myself. How to live instead of just survive. How to accept that wanting to heal isn't betraying you." In room 404, Raymond Morrison slept his first natural sleep in 101 days. His brain healing, his body recovering, his consciousness secure in the knowledge that the voice that had called him back from darkness hadn't been imagination, hadn't been dream. Nomad had been real, had been there, had kept the promise through 99 days of vigil. And some promises, once kept, changed everything. Opened doors that had seemed permanently closed, created possibilities that had felt impossible, proved that loyalty wasn't a weakness or a burden. It was strength. It was purpose. It was the thing that made them human instead of just survivors. It was what separated soldiers from brothers, what transformed duty into devotion, what allowed 2 old warriors to find each other again in the darkest hour and pull each other back toward the light. Day 101 ended with both men sleeping, both healing, both beginning the long journey from surviving to living. Together, the way brothers should. 6 weeks later, Vincent Chun sat in the therapy room watching Raymond struggle through physical rehabilitation. The stroke had stolen strength from his right side, made walking a challenge, turned simple tasks into battles that required determination Raymond had in abundance. The therapist guided him through exercises, gripping objects, lifting weights, relearning movements that had once been automatic. Raymond's face showed the effort, the frustration, but also the stubborn refusal to quit that had kept him alive in Cambodia and brought him back from 3 months of unconsciousness. Better, the therapist encouraged. Your grip strength has improved 20% this week alone. Raymond looked at Vincent. Good medic. Keeps me motivated. His speech was still halting. Words came slowly, but clearer each day. The damage would never fully heal, but neural pathways were rerouting, adapting, finding new ways to connect thought to language. Vincent had moved into the reintegration house Colonel Hartford had recommended, a converted Victorian in a quiet neighborhood, home to 8 veterans at various stages of rebuilding their lives. Some were recent. Others had been on the streets for years, all of them understanding what it meant to lose yourself and fight to find the way back. He had his own room, small but clean. He'd unpacked his few possessions. Elena's photograph on the dresser, his dog tags on the bedpost, the worn medical field guide on the nightstand. And now something new, a framed photograph of Raymond awake in his hospital bed, eyes open, hand gripping Vincent's. Brothers reunited. The house had rules, but they were gentle. Show up for group meals when you could. Contribute to chores. Attend weekly meetings if you felt ready. The goal wasn't control. It was community, connection, the slow rebuilding of trust in yourself and the world. Vincent had started helping in the house clinic, using his medical training to care for the other residents, treating infections, managing medications, providing the kind of basic health care that homeless veterans often couldn't access. It felt good to be useful again, to have purpose beyond a single promise. But every day, he returned to the hospital, spent hours with Raymond, talked him through exercises, reminded him who he was when the frustration got too heavy. 2 old soldiers helping each other heal, the way they'd always done. Dr. Nguyen had connected Vincent with her father's refugee assistance network. They'd been searching for more survivors from the village Tran's family had fled. 3 more families have been found. 3 more people whose lives continued because of what Vincent and Raymond's team had done in 1971. Each one wanted to meet the men who had saved them. The reunions were emotional, tearful, full of gratitude that Vincent still struggled to accept. But Tran was always there, reminding him that some debts were meant to be acknowledged, that accepting thanks was allowing others to complete their own healing. The fundraising campaign that had started with Marcus's viral video had raised $200,000. Vincent had refused to accept it personally. Instead, he'd worked with Hartford to establish a fund, medical care for homeless veterans, rapid rehousing assistance, support for families of soldiers killed in classified operations whose sacrifices went unrecognized. Torres's daughter had become the fund's administrator. Rodriguez's son volunteered as outreach coordinator. The children of the fallen channeling their grief into helping others, turning their father's deaths into something generative rather than simply tragic. Raymond's recovery continued slowly. After 8 weeks, he could walk with a cane. His speech had improved enough for simple conversations. His memory remained imperfect, some things sharp and clear, others lost to the damage. But he remembered Vincent, remembered Cambodia, remembered the promise. The hospital prepared for his discharge. He would transfer to the VA Rehabilitation Center, continue intensive therapy, work toward independent living if his progress continued. The prognosis was cautiously optimistic. He would never be who he was before the stroke, but he might regain enough function to have quality of life. Vincent sat with him the night before discharge. They'd moved Raymond to a regular room weeks ago, private, quiet, with a window that looked out over the city lights. Scared, Raymond admitted, his speech clearer tonight, words flowing more easily than they had in weeks. Don't know. What comes next? We figure out together, Vincent said. Same as always. You kept me alive in Cambodia. I kept you alive here. Now we keep each other alive going forward. Raymond's hand found Vincent's. Grip tight. 99 days, he said. You waited. 99 days. Would have waited 99 years if that's what it took, Vincent replied. That's the promise, Bear. Never leave anyone behind. Especially not my brother. The door opened. Jennifer Park entered carrying a small cake. Candles already lit. Behind her came Dr. Chun, Dr. Nguyen, Marcus Webb, Tran, his family, Hartford, and the families of the fallen. The room filled with people whose lives had been touched by two old soldiers who refused to break faith. "What's this?" Raymond asked. Jennifer smiled. "Day 145. Your discharge day. And Vincent's 45th day at the reintegration house. We thought it deserved celebrating." They sang, badly, joyfully, a room full of voices celebrating survival, celebrating loyalty, celebrating the miracle of promises kept against impossible odds. Raymond managed to blow out the candles with Vincent's help, made a wish he wouldn't share. But Vincent suspected it was the same wish he would have made, that they'd have more time, more days, more chances to prove that brotherhood survived everything. After the cake was distributed and eaten, after the well wishes and embraces, after everyone had left except Vincent, Raymond spoke quietly. "The letter," he said, "from Cambodia, the one I burned. I remember," Vincent said. "You said it contained everything you needed to say about brotherhood and sacrifice." Raymond nodded slowly. "Elite. Didn't burn it. Kept it. All these years. In case." He gestured to his bedside table. "Bottom drawer. Sealed envelope." Vincent retrieved it. The envelope was yellowed with age, sealed with wax that had cracked but held. His name written in Raymond's younger handwriting across the front. "Read it," Raymond said, "when you're ready, when you need to remember why." Vincent held the letter carefully, felt the weight of words written 52 years ago by a young soldier who thought he might die. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything, for taking those bullets, for making me promise, for fighting your way back when anyone else would have quit." "Thank you," Raymond replied, his eyes bright, "for keeping the promise, for showing me what loyalty really means." They sat in comfortable silence. Two old soldiers who had survived hell together, who had lost brothers and carried the weight and refused to break under it, who had proven that some bonds transcended time and damage and all the forces that tried to separate people. Tomorrow, Raymond would transfer to the VA, begin the next phase of recovery. Vincent would visit daily, would continue his work at the reintegration house, would slowly rebuild a life that had meaning beyond a single promise. But tonight, they were simply here, together, brothers who had kept faith with each other across 52 years and 99 days and all the darkness in between. Vincent stood to leave, squeezed Raymond's hand one final time. "Get some rest. I'll see you tomorrow at the VA. Nomad," Raymond called as Vincent reached the door, his voice stronger now, more certain. "Still here." Vincent smiled, the phrase that had anchored him through 6 years of homelessness, through 99 days of vigil, through all the moments when giving up would have been easier than continuing. "Still here," Vincent confirmed, "still trying. And this time, brother, we're both still here, both trying, both refusing to quit." He walked back to the reintegration house, through streets that had once felt hostile, past corners where he'd slept, past alleys where he'd hidden. The city looked different now, less threatening, more like a place he might actually belong. In his room, he opened the sealed letter Raymond had kept for 52 years. The wax cracked easily. Inside was a single page, written in careful script, the words of a young soldier preparing for death, but hoping for life. "Nomad, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I need you to know it wasn't your fault. You did everything possible. You always do. But some wounds are too deep. Some fights can't be won. If I die, it's because that was my time. Not because you failed. You never fail. You just refuse to quit trying. That's what makes you the best medic I've ever known. That's what makes you my brother. So if I'm gone, I need you to promise me something. Don't carry my death like you carry everything else. Don't let guilt destroy you. Instead, live. Live fully. Live loudly. Live enough for both of us. Take the life I gave you by taking those bullets and make it mean something. Help others. Save others. Be the man who never leaves anyone behind. That's your gift, your purpose, your mission. And I died protecting that mission because it matters more than my life ever could. Take care of yourself, brother. And remember that loving someone enough to die for them means wanting them to live after you're gone. So live. Promise me. Your brother always, Bear. Vincent read it 3 times. tears streaming down his face, understanding finally why Raymond had made him promise in Cambodia, why he'd burned the letter after surviving, why he kept it all these years anyway. Because Raymond had known, had understood that Vincent would need these words someday, would need permission to live instead of just survive, would need his brother telling him that loyalty didn't mean destroying yourself. It meant honoring those you loved by becoming who they believed you could be. Vincent folded the letter carefully, placed it beside Elena's photograph. Two people he'd loved, two people who wanted him to heal, to live, to find purpose and meaning and connection again. Tomorrow he would visit Raymond, would continue his work, would take one more step toward rebuilding a life worth living. But tonight he simply sat with the letter and the photograph and the understanding that promises kept didn't end when the vigil was over. They continued, evolved, became the foundation for whatever came next. Still here, he whispered to the empty room, to Elena's image, to Raymond recovering across the city, to the brothers who had died in Cambodia, to everyone who had believed he was worth saving. Still here, still trying. And finally, after 6 years of running, ready to live again. If you connected with this story about loyalty, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds of brotherhood, please subscribe to our channel. Share in the comments about the quiet heroes in your life who deserve recognition. Sometimes the greatest warriors aren't the ones still in uniform, but the ones who keep promises no matter the cost. Thank you for watching.